My daughter won the science fair, and the Billionaire CEO presenting the award was the father who abandoned us. The acrylic trophy nearly slipped from his hand when his eyes found mine, and then her dimple. Have you ever watched your past walk into a gym full of folding chairs and ask to rewrite your future? Mr. Steele Rich family, thank you for helping us pass 700 subscribers. If you're new here, hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Because when the billionaire sponsor is the man who left me and the father he never knew he was, every choice becomes a test. Stay with me to the end, because what we chose in the quiet changed more than any headline ever could. The Kaimuki Elementary Gymnasium smelled like floor polish and buttered popcorn on the night everything shifted. Parents filled metal folding chairs arranged in crooked rows, their phone, cameras already raised, ready to capture whichever child crossed the stage. A banner stretched across the basketball hoop read Honolulu Youth Science Fair to Celebrating. Innovation in blue block letters that someone had clearly printed at an office supply store. I stood near the back wall, my arms crossed, watching my daughter Sienna adjust her trifold presentation board for the 4th time. She wore the navy dress we'd picked out together at Ross 3 weeks earlier, the one with pockets deep enough to hold her index cards. Her hair was pulled into 2 puffs, edges smoothed with the coconut oil gel she insisted worked better than anything else. She looked so much like me at 12. Same serious eyebrows, same way of biting her lower lip when concentrating. But that dimple when she smiled belonged entirely to him. Sienna's project sat on the 3rd table from the left, low-cost water filtration using biochar and cactus mucilage. She'd spent months testing ratios, filling our kitchen with mason jars of murky water, recording pH levels in a composition notebook with a cracked spine, when she discovered that combining activated biochar with the sticky substance from prickly pear cactus could remove up to 87% of contaminants. She'd run through the house yelling like she'd won the lottery. "Mama, this could help people," she'd said that night, her eyes bright. Like real people who don't have clean water. I believed her then. I believe her now. The fair coordinator, a woman named Mrs. Patterson, tapped the microphone twice, sending feedback squealing through the speakers. Parents winced. A few kids giggled. She cleared her throat and began announcing the 3rd place winner, a boy who'd built a model of the solar system using recycled materials. Polite applause followed him to the stage. 2nd place went to a girl who'd studied the effect of music on plant growth. More applause. Slightly louder. Then Mrs. Patterson paused, glancing down at her notes with a smile that seemed too wide, too rehearsed. "Our 1st place winner this year tackled a problem affecting millions worldwide," she said, her voice lifting with that particular brightness adults use when they want kids to feel inspired. Her project demonstrates not only scientific rigor, but genuine compassion. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Sienna Clark for her project on affordable water filtration. The applause swelled. I clapped so hard my palms stung, pride blooming hot in my chest. Sienna walked toward the stage with careful steps, her shoulders straight, trying not to smile too wide but failing. That dimple creased her left cheek. That's when the side door opened. 3 people stepped in, moving with the kind of quiet confidence that doesn't ask for permission. The woman in front wore a charcoal blazer and held a tablet. Behind her, a man in a fitted polo shirt carried a leather portfolio, and behind them both, taller than I remembered, his jawline sharper but his eyes exactly the same. Tristan Cale. The air left my lungs in one silent rush. He looked different. Older, yes, we both were, 9 years would do that, but also polished in a way that didn't exist back when we were 21 and dreaming in my studio apartment. His shirt probably cost more than my rent. His watch caught the gymnasium lights and threw them back like a challenge. His hair was cut close, neat, and professional. But his hands, I noticed his hands first, still moved the same way, one thumb rubbing against his palm when he was thinking. He was scanning the room, his gaze sweeping across the rows of parents and students, and I knew the exact moment he found me. His eyes stopped. His breath caught. I couldn't hear it, but I saw his chest halt mid-rise. Recognition landed like a stone dropped into still water. Then his gaze shifted just slightly to the left, to Sienna. She was on stage now, accepting the trophy from Mrs. Patterson, her grin so wide it made my heart hurt. She held the acrylic award in both hands, tilting it to catch the light, and when she looked out into the crowd searching for me, she smiled with her whole face. Tristan's expression changed. It wasn't dramatic. He didn't gasp or stumble. But I watched something move through his features. Confusion first, then calculation, then a dawning realization that made his grip tighten on the trophy he was holding. The woman in the blazer leaned toward him and whispered something. He nodded without taking his eyes off Sienna. Off our daughter. The daughter he didn't know existed. Mrs. Patterson was saying something about a special guest, about how fortunate they were to have secured sponsorship from Cale Ventures, about how Mr. Cale himself had come to present an additional scholarship opportunity to the winner. Her words blurred into noise. All I could hear was my own pulse hammering against my eardrums. Tristan stepped forward, and the parent next to me whispered, "Oh my God, that's him, the tech guy. He's worth like $2 billion. $2 billion didn't matter when you were staring at the man who left without saying goodbye." Tristan walked toward the stage with measured steps, the kind that come from boardrooms and investor meetings, not elementary school gyms. The woman in the charcoal blazer stayed 2 paces behind him, her tablet glowing. Parents shifted in their seats, craning their necks. Someone near the front row started clapping, and the applause built again, uncertain. At first, then enthusiastic as people realized they were supposed to be impressed. Sienna stood center stage, still holding her trophy, her expression caught between pride and confusion. She didn't know who this man was. Why would she? I'd shown her exactly 2 photographs of her father, both from before everything fell apart, and told her he'd moved away for work before she was born. Not a lie, technically, just incomplete. Mrs. Patterson gestured for Tristan to take the microphone. He accepted it with a nod, his professional smile fixed in place, but when he glanced towards Sienna again, I saw his hand tremble slightly. "Thank you, Mrs. Patterson," he said, his voice deeper than I remembered, smoother. "I'm Tristan Cale, founder of Cale Ventures. We focus on supporting innovation that addresses real-world problems, particularly in underserved communities." He was good at this, the public speaking, the polished delivery. 9 years ago, he'd stumbled through presenting his business plan to potential investors, sweating through his shirt, gripping note cards until they bent. Now he commanded the room without effort. "When my team brought me Sienna's project," he continued, looking directly at her now, "I was struck by 2 things. First, the scientific approach. Combining biochar with cactus mucilage isn't just creative, it's practical and scalable. Second, the reason behind it." He paused, and in that silence, I watched him study her face, the shape of her nose, the set of her eyebrows. That dimple, he knew, maybe not with absolute certainty, not yet, but enough to make his next words come out slower, weighted with something beyond corporate generosity. "Sienna, your project description says you wanted to help communities without access to clean water. That kind of thinking, focusing on impact over awards, is what we need more of in this world." Sienna's cheeks flushed. She nodded, still clutching the trophy. "So Cale Ventures would like to offer you a $5,000 scholarship," Tristan said, and the gymnasium erupted. Parents whooped. The kids cheered. Mrs. Patterson pressed both hands to her chest like she might cry. $5,000. My throat tightened. That was Sienna's braces. That was the laptop she needed for middle school. That was breathing room we hadn't had in years. It was also a door opening that I'd kept closed for 9 years. Tristan extended his hand towards Sienna. She shook it, her small fingers disappearing into his palm, and smiled up at him. I watched his expression crack just for a second, something raw and unguarded, breaking through the professional veneer before he pulled it back. The woman in the blazer stepped forward with a folder. "We'll need a parent or guardian to sign some paperwork," she said pleasantly, scanning the crowd. "Is Sienna's mother or father here?" Every eye in the gymnasium turned toward the back wall. Toward me. I couldn't move. My legs had forgotten how. My hands hung useless at my sides. Across the room, Tristan's gaze locked onto mine again, and this time there was no confusion, no uncertainty. Just recognition, sharp and absolute. And then Sienna, bright and oblivious and so proud, pointed directly at me. "That's my mama," she called out, her voice carrying across the folding chairs. And science projects, and all the space I'd put between then and now. Leilani Clark. Tristan went absolutely still. The woman with the tablet looked between us, her professional smile flickering with uncertainty. The man with the portfolio shifted his weight. Mrs. Patterson, bless her, was already waving me forward. "Miss Clark, if you could come sign, we'll get everything processed," she said cheerfully. I forced my feet to move. One step, then another, navigating between chairs and backpacks and parents who were already pulling out their phones to search for the billionaire in their children's gym. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard, I thought everyone must hear it. Sienna beamed at me from the stage. She had no idea. No idea that the man handing her a scholarship was the same one whose eyes she'd inherited, whose stubborn streak lived in her bones, whose absence I'd explained away with half-truths and careful omissions. I climbed the 3 steps to the stage, my heels clicking against the wood, and stopped 2 feet from Tristan Cale. Up close, I could see the fine lines starting at the corners of his eyes. The small scar above his left eyebrow from when he'd tried to fix my ceiling fan and dropped the screwdriver. The way his cologne was different now. Expensive. Nothing like the drugstore body spray he used to wear. Leilani. My name in his mouth sounded like a question, an accusation, a prayer. Tristan. I kept my voice level, neutral, and gave him nothing. The woman with the tablet stepped between us, mercifully oblivious. "Just need a signature here, and we'll send the scholarship details to your email." She held out a pen. My hand reached for it, but Tristan moved at the same moment, and our fingers brushed against the metal clip. The contact lasted less than a second. It felt like falling. I signed my name on 3 different lines, while my daughter stood close enough for me to smell the coconut oil in her hair. My handwriting looked nothing like it usually did, tight and cramped instead of flowing. The woman with the tablet smiled, collected the papers, and stepped back. "Congratulations again, Sienna," she said warmly. "Someone from our office will reach out within the week to discuss mentorship, opportunities and how we can support your continued research." Mentorship opportunities. Continued research. The words landed like commitments I hadn't agreed to, doors opening wider with each syllable. "Thank you so much," Sienna said, her voice high with excitement. She looked up at Tristan again. "I've read about your company. You funded that water desalination project in American Samoa, right?" Of course she'd researched him. My daughter treated every topic like a science experiment. Observe, question, investigate. She'd probably spent hours reading articles after Mrs. Patterson announced the sponsorship last week. Tristan's expression softened. "That's right. We're always looking for solutions that can scale across the Pacific Islands. Your biochar approach could actually complement some of that work." "Really?" Sienna's eyes went wide. "Because I've been thinking about how to reduce production costs, and if we could source the cactus locally instead of—" "Sienna." I put my hand on her shoulder, gentle but firm. "Mr. Cale probably has other places to be." It came out sharper than I intended. Sienna blinked up at me, confused by the edge in my voice. Tristan's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. "Actually, I was hoping we could talk for a moment," he said, his eyes on me, not her, "about the scholarship details." Just briefly. The woman in the blazer and the man with the portfolio had already moved toward the exit, giving him space. Mrs. Patterson was busy ushering parents toward the refreshment table. The gymnasium buzzed with conversation and the scraping of folding chairs. But the 3 of us stood in a bubble of terrible, fragile silence. "Mama." Sienna looked between us, her scientist brain already working, already noticing the tension she couldn't quite name. I wanted to grab her hand and walk out. I wanted to protect her from the conversation that was coming, from the questions that would follow, from the moment when her entire understanding of her family would shift beneath her feet like sand. But I also knew had known from the second Tristan walked through that door that running would only delay the inevitable. "Baby, why don't you go show Auntie Makina your trophy?" I said, nodding toward my best friend who stood near the popcorn machine, watching us with barely concealed concern. "I'll be right there." Sienna hesitated, her gaze lingering on Tristan. Something flickered across her face, curiosity maybe, or the beginning of recognition she didn't have words for yet. Kids know things before they know them. They feel the truth before adults admit it. "Okay," she said slowly. Then, to Tristan, "Thank you again for the scholarship. You earned it," he replied, and his voice cracked just enough for me to hear. We watched her walk away, her trophy catching the overhead lights, her steps bouncing with residual excitement. The moment she reached Makina and started talking, gesturing wildly with her free hand, Tristan turned to me. 9 years, he said quietly. "She's 9, isn't she?" Not a question, a calculation. "She's 12, I corrected, my voice flat. "She'll be 13 in 4 months. His face went pale. 12, so you were, when I left you were, pregnant? "Yes." I crossed my arms. "About 10 weeks, though I didn't know it yet." The gymnasium noise faded to background static. Tristan ran his hand over his face, the gesture so familiar it hurt. I'd seen him do that 1,000 times, when he was stressed about money, about his failing startup, about whether he should take the job offer in San Francisco that would pay real money but kill the business he'd built from nothing. He'd taken the job. Left 2 days later. Called once from the airport to say he'd send for me when he got settled. He never called again. "You didn't tell me," he said finally. "You changed your number, blocked my email." The words came out cold, factual. I'd had 12 years to file down the sharp edges of my anger. What was I supposed to do, Tristan? Send a telegram? I tried to. He stopped, shaking his head. There were reasons. Things got complicated with the investors, and I thought, "I don't care what you thought." I kept my voice low, controlled, aware that we were still in a room full of people who would love nothing more than gossip about the single mom and the billionaire. What I care about is my daughter, who is brilliant and kind, and has never asked for anything except the truth about her father. A truth I've been protecting her from because I wasn't sure you deserved to be part of it. That landed. I saw it hit him square in the chest. "Does she know?" he asked. "About me?" She knows her father left before she was born. She knows his name. She's seen 2 pictures. I paused. She doesn't know he's standing in front of her right now, offering scholarship money like it's enough. Tristan flinched. "I want to. I need to." "You need to leave." I glanced towards Sienna, who was now showing her project to Makina, explaining the filtration ratios with her hands. "Before she starts asking questions, neither of us is ready to answer in a public place. Leilani, give me your number." I pulled out my phone, hands steadier than I felt. The real one this time. "We'll talk, but not here. Not now. Not with her watching." He recited the digits. I saved them under TKL with no other identifying information, just in case Sienna ever scrolled through my contacts. "When?" he asked. "I'll call you. Tomorrow, maybe. When I've figured out how to explain this without breaking her heart." Across the room, Sienna looked up and waved at me. I waved back, forcing a smile. Tristan saw it too, that wave, the trust in her eyes that her mother had everything under control. "She looks like both of us," I finished, "which is going to make this a lot harder to hide if people start paying attention." He nodded slowly, understanding the weight of what I wasn't saying. His face was everywhere now. Tech blogs, business magazines, local news whenever he donated to another cause. If someone connected the dots, if a photo from tonight surfaced with the 3 of us in frame, the story would write itself. Billionaire's secret daughter, single mom kept child hidden. Tech mogul's love child. The headlines would eat Sienna alive. "I'll wait for your call," Tristan said quietly. "But Leilani, I want to know her. However that looks, whatever it takes. I want to be her father." "You don't get to want things and have them appear anymore," I said. That's not how being a parent works. He absorbed that without argument, and something about his silence felt like the first honest thing between us. The woman in the blazer appeared at his elbow, murmuring about their next appointment. Tristan nodded, cast one more long look toward Sienna, then walked toward the exit with his team trailing behind him. I stayed, because when you're a mom, your choices stop being only yours. I stood there watching my daughter laugh with McKenna, watching her hold that trophy like it was made of gold. Instead of cheap acrylic, watching her exist in the last moments before her world would change forever. She deserved better than this. Better than a father who showed up 12 years late with a checkbook and good intentions. Better than a mother who'd hidden the truth because she was too hurt and too scared to do the harder thing. But this was what we had. This messy, complicated, impossible situation where the past and present collided in an elementary school gym that smelled like popcorn and floor polish. Tomorrow, I'd call him. Tomorrow, we'd start figuring out how to tell her. Tomorrow, we'd begin the work of building something from the wreckage of what we'd broken. Tonight, I'd let her have this. The win, the scholarship, the uncomplicated joy of being 12 and brilliant and celebrated. Tomorrow could wait. It would have to. I walked toward McKenna and Sienna, plastering on a smile that felt more real with each step. My daughter turned to me, trophy in hand, pride radiating from every inch of her. Mama, Auntie McKenna says we should celebrate with ice cream. Can we? Please. Absolutely, baby. Whatever you want. Whatever she wanted. For tonight, that was enough. The conversation with Tristan, the explanations, the fallout, all of that could wait until tomorrow. Tonight belonged to Sienna. The parking lot outside Kaimuki Elementary smelled like plumeria and exhaust fumes. Parents streamed toward their cars, kids weaving between them with certificates and ribbons clutched in sticky hands. I held Sienna's trophy while she ran ahead to where her friends clustered. Near the gate, all of them talking over each other about their projects. Mama, can I go to Haley's house? Sienna called back, already knowing the answer. Friday nights were movie nights and had been since she was 6. Not tonight, baby. We're celebrating you at home. I raised the trophy slightly. Ice cream and whatever movie you want. She groaned but smiled, then turned back to her friends for another round of excited chatter. I watched her from 10 feet away, the way mothers do when they need a moment to remember how to breathe. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Unknown number, but I knew exactly who it was. Please, just coffee. 1 hour. You name the place. I shouldn't have saved his number. Shouldn't have expected him to wait until tomorrow like I'd said. Men like Tristan Cale, men who'd built empires from failed startups and investor pitch decks, didn't wait well. I typed back with shaking thumbs, Cocoa Head Cafe. Tomorrow morning. 9 a.m. Come alone. But 3 dots appeared immediately. Then, I'll be there. I deleted both messages and shoved the phone back into my pocket. Mama! Sienna jogged back to me, slightly out of breath. Haley says Mr. Cale donated to her school too. He built them a whole computer lab. Do you think he'll really help with my project? Her eyes held that particular gleam, the one that appeared whenever she discovered something fascinating. The same look she'd had when she first saw bioluminescent plankton at Lanikai Beach, or when she figured out that vinegar and baking soda created carbon dioxide, or when she realized that asking why 3 times usually got to the real answer. Maybe, I said carefully, but your project is already amazing, with or without his help. I know. She took the trophy from my hands, turning it to watch the light refract through the cheap acrylic. But think about it, Mama. If I could actually make enough filters for a whole village, he has connections. He could help it go from a science fair project to something real. There was no arguing with her logic. There never was. Let's get home, I said instead. You still need to pick your movie before Auntie McKenna eats all the mint chips. Sienna laughed and headed toward our car, a 15-year-old Honda Civic with a dent in the passenger door and a check engine light that had been on for 3 months. As I unlocked it, I caught sight of a black Tesla pulling out of the far end of the lot, windows tinted dark enough to hide whoever sat inside. But I knew he'd stayed to watch her, to see her smile one more time before disappearing into whatever five-star hotel he was staying at. Whatever world he'd built that looked nothing like the cramped apartment we'd shared when we were young and broke and convinced that love could survive anything. I was wrong then. I couldn't afford to be wrong now. We drove home through Friday night traffic, Sienna chattering about the other projects and which judges asked the hardest questions. She didn't notice my white-knuckled grip on the steering wheel or the way. I kept checking the rearview mirror like the past might be following us. By the time we got home, McKenna was already there with 3 pints of ice cream and a bag of microwave popcorn. She took one look at my face and knew something had happened beyond the science fair win. Movie time, she announced to Sienna. You pick while I talk to your mama for exactly 2 minutes. Sienna disappeared into the living room, already scrolling through streaming options on her tablet. McKenna pulled me into the kitchen. What happened? She whispered. Tristan Cale is Sienna's father. McKenna's eyes went wide. The billionaire? The one who gave her the scholarship? He didn't know about her. Until tonight. The words tumbled out faster now. He saw her, he saw me, and he figured it out. Just like that. 9 years of keeping it separate, and it all came crashing down in an elementary school gym. Olé. McKenna grabbed my hands. What are you going to do? I don't know. We're meeting tomorrow to talk, to figure out. I stopped, the weight of it crushing down. To figure out how to tell her that her father isn't some distant memory who moved away. He's here, he's real, and he wants to know her. Do you want him to know her? The question cut straight to everything I'd been avoiding. I don't know, I admitted. I don't know if I can trust him. I don't know if this is good for Sienna, or if it's just going to break her heart when he leaves again. Then find out tomorrow, McKenna said firmly. Meet him, ask the hard questions, and decide based on what he does, not what he did 9 years ago. Sound advice. Terrifying, but sound. Coco Head Cafe sat wedged between a yoga studio and a vintage clothing shop in a neighborhood. That had gentrified just enough to serve $12 avocado toast, but not enough to lose its soul. I arrived at 8:45, early on purpose, and claimed the corner table furthest from the windows. The Saturday morning crowd was light, a few tourists studying hiking maps, a couple sharing a waffle, 2 women with laptops and complicated coffee orders. I ordered black coffee I didn't want, and waited. Tristan walked in at exactly 9 o'clock wearing jeans and a plain white T-shirt, and somehow that felt worse than the expensive polo from last night. This was the version of him I remembered, casual, understated, the boy who used to meet me at places exactly like this to split a muffin and plan a future we never got to build. He spotted me immediately. No hesitation, no scanning the room. He walked straight to my table and sat down without asking permission. Thank you for meeting me, he said. You have 55 minutes. I checked my phone deliberately. Sienna thinks I'm at the farmer's market. A shadow crossed his face at her name, but he nodded. Fair enough. The barista called out a drink order. Someone laughed too loudly near the counter. Normal cafe sounds. Normal Saturday morning. Everything completely normal, except the fault line cracking open between us. I didn't sleep, Tristan said quietly. I kept thinking about math. When I left, you would have been about 10 weeks pregnant. I wrapped both hands around my coffee mug, even though it was too hot. I didn't know yet. Found out about 2 weeks after you stopped answering my calls. He absorbed that like a physical blow. I changed my number because I don't need the reasons anymore, Tristan. I needed them 9 years ago when I was 21 and terrified and trying to figure out how to finish community college while growing as a human. Now, I shook my head. Now, I just need to know what you want. He stopped, recalibrated. I need to know why you didn't find a way to tell me. My parents still live in the same house. My sister's number never changed. You could have what? Tracked down your family to announce that the son who'd just landed a 6-figure job in San Francisco had gotten his girlfriend pregnant before ghosting her? The bitterness leaked through despite my best efforts. Your mom already thought I wasn't good enough for you. Showing up pregnant and abandoned would have just confirmed it. She never said that. She didn't have to. I took a sip of coffee, using the moment to steady myself. But this isn't about me and you. This stopped being about us the second she was born. Tristan leaned forward, his hands flat on the table. Is she mine? The question hung between us, formal and terrible and necessary. Yes. The word landed and settled. Tristan closed his eyes, his breath leaving in one long exhale. When he opened them again, they were wet. I have a daughter, he said, like he was testing the sentence, trying to make it real. You have a daughter who has lived 12 years without you, who learned to ride a bike while I jogged beside her because there was no one else, who asked me every Father's Day why hers didn't want to know her. My voice stayed level, factual. So before you start thinking about softball games and college funds, you need to understand what you're walking into. Tell me. She's brilliant, relentless. She doesn't accept simple answers. She wants data, evidence, proof. She'll test you without meaning to. I paused. And she'll ask why you left. Not today, maybe not next week, but eventually she'll ask. And you'd better have an answer that doesn't destroy her. Tristan dragged both hands through his hair. That old familiar gesture. I don't have a good answer, Leilani. The job was supposed to be temporary. 6 months, maybe a year, then I'd have enough saved to come back and launch the company properly. But the investors wanted me on site. Then there was the acquisition offer, and everything moved so fast. You had time to change your number, but not to send a text. The words came out flat, empty of accusation, because I'd said them to myself 1,000 times already. You made a choice. Maybe you didn't know about Sienna, but you knew about me, and you chose anyway. He didn't argue. Couldn't, probably. I was a coward, he said finally. I thought cutting contact would be cleaner than admitting I didn't know how to do both, build the company and keep us. I convinced myself you'd be better off without me dragging you through the chaos. I was already in the chaos, Tristan. I just had to survive it alone. The couple sharing a waffle got up and left. A new customer ordered something with oat milk and extra cinnamon. The cafe kept moving around us while we sat in the wreckage of 9 years. I can't fix what I did, Tristan said quietly. I can't give you back those years or make the hurt disappear, but I'm begging for a chance to know her, to be what she needs going forward, even if I can't change the past. This was the moment I'd rehearsed 100 different ways since last night. The anger I'd carried, the speeches I'd prepared, the boundaries I'd sworn I'd enforce. But sitting across from him, watching his hands shake slightly against the table, I remembered something I'd nearly forgotten. Tristan Cale had always been genuine. Flawed, yes. Capable of hurting people, absolutely. But never fake, never manipulative. He meant this. That didn't mean I trusted it. I need to know you're serious, I said. Not billionaire serious, where you throw money at problems. Actually serious. Because if you walk into her life and leave again, it won't be me you destroy. It'll be her. I'm not leaving. You say that now. I leaned back, arms crossed. But what happens when the board needs you in Singapore for 3 months? When some acquisition deal demands your attention? Sienna won't fit neatly into your calendar between investor meetings. Then I'll figure it out. His jaw set in that stubborn line I recognized. I'll move meetings, fly back weekends, hire people to handle whatever can be handled remotely. I built a company from nothing, Leilani. I can build a schedule that puts my daughter first. She's not a business problem you can optimize. I know that. Frustration bled into his voice. I'm not trying to. Look, I don't know how to be a father. I don't have a template for this. But I know how to show up and keep showing up until I figure it out. I studied his face, looking for cracks in the certainty, for hints of the man who'd disappeared with promises he never kept. What I found instead was fear underneath the determination, raw and honest and completely unpolished. He was terrified. Good. He should be. She asks hard questions, I said, about everything. Climate change, social justice, why some kids have clean water and others don't. If you can't handle being challenged by a 12-year-old, this won't work. I can handle it, She'll want to know why you never called. Why didn't you send birthday cards or show up for school events? Why did she have to watch other kids' dads at science fairs while hers was busy becoming a billionaire? Tristan flinched but held my gaze. What did you tell her about me? The truth. That you moved away for work before she was born. Those things between us didn't work out. That it wasn't her fault. I paused. I never said you didn't want her because I didn't actually know if that was true. You might have wanted her if you'd known, but you didn't know because you made yourself unreachable. If I could go back, you can't. None of us can. I softened slightly, exhaustion replacing anger. So the question isn't what you would have done differently, it's what you're going to do now. He sat forward, urgent. Let me meet her, properly, not as the billionaire sponsor, as... He struggled with the word, as her father. Or as someone who wants to be. She doesn't know you're her father. Then tell her. He said it like it was simple. It's not that easy, Tristan. I can't just drop that information on her and hope she processes it okay. She'll have questions I can't answer, feelings I can't predict. And if this goes badly, if you hurt her, I will never forgive you. Never. The threat hung between us, absolute. I understand, he said. What do you need from me? Finally, the right question. I pulled out my phone and opened the Notes app where I'd listed everything at 3 in the morning, while Sienna slept down the hall, oblivious to the earthquake coming. First, we tell her together, I said. Not you, not me alone. Together, so she sees we're on the same page about this. Tristan nodded. Okay. When? Soon. This weekend, maybe. Before someone at that science fair connects the dots and she hears it from a classmate's parent. I scroll down my list. Years of single parenting condensed into bullet points written in desperation and coffee. Second, this goes at her pace. If she needs space, you give it to her. If she has questions, you answer them honestly. If she's angry, and she might be, you sit with that anger and don't make excuses. Understood. Third, no public announcements. No press releases about your long-lost daughter. She gets to decide how much of this story belongs to the world and how much stays private. Something flickered across his expression. Concern, maybe, or calculation. There are people who might find out anyway. Journalists, investors who like digging into personal lives. I can't control every... Then you protect her from it. My voice went hard. You have lawyers and PR people and all the resources money can buy. Use them to keep her out of the headlines, not to craft some redemption narrative for yourself. He absorbed that without argument. What else? You don't try to buy her affection. No expensive gifts, no trips to Disneyland, no unlimited credit cards. She's 12, Tristan. She needs consistency, not compensation. I wasn't going to... Yes, you were. Maybe not consciously, but you were already thinking about how money could smooth this over. It can't. I locked my phone and set it on the table between us. What she needs is time. Your actual presence. Showing up even when it's inconvenient or uncomfortable. That's what fathers do. The word, fathers, seemed to hit him differently this time. He sat back, processing. Where do we do this? He asked quietly. Where do I meet her? Your place? Mine? Neutral ground. I'd thought about this too, scrolling through options while the ceiling fan circled above my bed. There's a community garden near the university. Sienna volunteers there sometimes, helping with the youth plots. It's public enough that she'll feel safe, private enough that we can talk without an audience. A garden. He almost smiled. She really does care about environmental stuff. It's not a phase. It's who she is. I felt the familiar swell of pride. She wants to fix things, make the world better. She gets frustrated when adults talk about problems without actually solving them. She gets that from you. The observation landed softer than I expected. I didn't confirm or deny it, just checked the time. 42 minutes had passed. Next Saturday, I said, making the decision even as doubt clawed at my throat. 1 week from today, 2 in the afternoon. I'll tell her during the week that there's something important we need to discuss. Prepare her without explaining everything. Next Saturday, Tristan repeated, and the word sounded like a promise and a plea. "I'll be there. I swear I'll be there. You'd better be. Because if you don't show up, if you do this to her twice—" I stood, gathering my phone and keys. "There won't be a third chance." I left him sitting at the table with cold coffee and the weight of 12 years pressing down on his shoulders. The clock had started. 1 week to figure out how to tell my daughter that her father wasn't a distant memory but a living, breathing person who wanted back into her life. 1 week to prepare for everything to change. 1 week until there was no going back. I walked to my car in the morning sunshine, got in, locked the doors, and let myself shake for exactly 3 minutes. Then I drove to the farmer's market like I'd told Sienna I would, bought the mangoes she loved and the fresh basil I didn't need, and went home to the daughter who still trusted that I had all the answers. 7 days. That's all I had left before the truth became unavoidable. Saturday morning arrived with a kind of sunshine that made Honolulu postcards look honest. I woke at 6:30 to find Sienna already awake, sitting cross-legged on the living room floor surrounded by index cards covered in her small, precise handwriting. "State competition prep," she explained without looking up. "Mrs. Patterson says they'll ask follow-up questions about scalability and cost analysis. I need to be ready." The state science fair was 3 weeks away. 3 weeks that suddenly felt impossibly far and dangerously close at the same time. I made breakfast while she practiced her presentation to an audience of our ancient couch and the philodendron plant she'd named Dr. Leaf. Scrambled eggs with Portuguese sausage, rice left over from last night, sliced mango arranged on the plate the way she liked. Our Saturday ritual, unchanged for years. "Mama, if I get to state, do you think Mr. Cale's company would sponsor travel costs?" Sienna asked between bites. Mrs. Patterson said sometimes winners need help getting to the mainland if they qualify for nationals. I focused on my coffee, buying time. "Maybe. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. You always say that when you mean probably not, but I don't want to disappoint you." She grinned, mango juice on her chin. "I know your translations now. Too smart." She'd always been too smart. After breakfast, I drove to Pearl City to pick up flyers for the community center fundraiser I'd been coordinating. Another side hustle that brought in just enough to keep the electricity on and Sienna's growing feet in shoes that fit. The print shop smelled like ink and paper, familiar and grounding. I checked every flyer for errors I knew wouldn't be there, just to have something to do with my hands. The owner, Uncle Ray, handed me the box with a smile. "How's our science star?" Saw the post on the school's Facebook page. "Big scholarship, yeah?" "She's good. Working hard." I kept my voice light, casual, gave him nothing to build gossip from. "Tell her congratulations from us. That Cale guy, he's doing good things. Not like these tech people who forget where they come from." I nodded and left before he could say anything else about Tristan. Back home, Sienna had moved to the kitchen table, her project notebook open. Making calculations with a pencil, she kept flipping between her fingers. A habit she'd had since she was 7, thinking with her hands, working through problems by giving her brain something physical to do. I watched her from the doorway, memorizing this version of her, the girl who still believed adults had answers, who trusted that the world made sense if you asked enough questions, who didn't yet know that her entire origin story was about to shift. In 7 days, I would take that certainty from her. The thought made my stomach clench. "You okay, Mama?" Sienna looked up, her brow furrowed with concern. "Yeah, baby. Just tired." I smiled, and she accepted it because she had no reason not to. "You want to go to the garden next Saturday? Help with the weekend watering? Can we go around 2? I want to finish these calculations first." 2 o'clock. Exactly when I'd told Tristan to meet us. 2 is perfect, I said. The hours crawled. I folded laundry that didn't need folding, reorganized the kitchen cabinets, wiped down surfaces already clean. Sienna stayed focused on her work, occasionally asking me to quiz her on water contamination statistics or biochar activation temperatures. Every time she said "Mama," my heart jumped. By noon, I'd rehearsed 17 different ways to start the conversation, some gentle, some direct, all of them feeling inadequate. And Sienna, you know how I told you your father moved away for work? Too casual, like I was correcting a minor misunderstanding instead of rewriting her history. There's something important I need to tell you about your dad. Too ominous. She'd panic before I got to the actual words. Remember Mr. Cale from the science fair? Too abrupt. No preparation, no softness. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my phone, pulling up Tristan's contact for the 15th time. I could cancel. Text him that I'd changed my mind, that Sienna wasn't ready, that we needed more time. But time for what? To make this easier. There was no version of this conversation that didn't hurt. McKenna called at 12:30, her face filling my screen with concern I hadn't asked for but desperately needed. Have you told her yet? She asked, without preamble. Telling her next Saturday, at the garden. I kept my voice low, even though Sienna was in the other room with headphones on. You want me there? No. This needs to be just us. Me, her, and... I couldn't quite say his name. Him. McKenna was quiet for a moment. Are you sure about this? About letting him in? No. But what's the alternative? He knows about her now. She deserves to know about him. Keeping it secret just protects me, not her. You've protected her for 12 years. That's not nothing. I protected her from abandonment, from wondering why she wasn't enough to make him stay. I rubbed my eyes, exhaustion pressing down. But now he's here, and he wants to try. And if I say no, eventually she'll find out I kept them apart. She'll hate me for it. She could never hate you. You don't know that. She asks hard questions, Keena. She'll want to know why I didn't tell her the second I knew he was back. Why didn't I give her the choice? Because you're her mother, and sometimes mothers have to make impossible calls. McKenna's voice went firm. You did what you thought was right. That's all anyone can do. I wanted to believe her. What if this breaks her? I whispered. What if it doesn't? What if she's stronger than you think? That was the fear underneath the fear. Not that Sienna would crumble, but that she wouldn't need me the same way anymore. That introducing Tristan would mean sharing her, diluting the bond we'd built when it was just us against everything. Selfish. I knew it was selfish. I told her anyway. After McKenna hung up, I stood in the hallway outside Sienna's room, listening to her hum while she worked. Some pop songs I didn't recognize, slightly off-key, completely unself-conscious. I turned toward my own bedroom and opened the closet, reaching past shoes and storage bins, to the back corner where I kept things I couldn't throw away but couldn't look at either. The shoebox was brown, ordinary, the kind that had once held a pair of Target sandals. I pulled it down and sat on the floor with it in my lap, not opening it yet. Inside were the artifacts of early motherhood, Sienna's hospital bracelet, so small it looked fake. Her first drawing, brown crayon scribbles I'd insisted were a masterpiece. A lock of hair from her first haircut. Ultrasound photos where she looked like a blob with a heartbeat. Every birthday card I'd signed from Mama with no second signature beside it. And underneath everything, in an envelope I'd addressed but never sent, the letter. I'd written it when Sienna was 3 months old, during one of those midnight feeding sessions when exhaustion made everything feel both impossible and crystal clear. 22 pages, front and back, telling Tristan everything. About the pregnancy, the birth, the way she had his nose and my stubborn streak. About how scared I was, how angry, how despite everything I wished he could see her smile. I'd carried that letter to the post office twice. Stood in line, stamp ready, address checked and rechecked. Never mailed it. Because sending it meant admitting I still cared what he thought. Meant opening a door I'd been trying to seal shut. Meant risking that he'd read 22 pages about his daughter and still choose not to come. The envelope was yellowed now, the ink slightly faded. I held it without opening it. I didn't need to read the words. I remembered every single one. Dear Tristan, you have a daughter. The rest poured back in painful detail. The hope threaded through anger, the vulnerability I'd been too young to hide, the plea buried in every paragraph. Please come back. Please meet her. Please choose us this time. He never got the chance to choose because I never gave him the option. I put the letter back in the box, under the ultrasound photos, and returned it to the closet corner. Some doors needed to stay closed. That version of me, desperate and hopeful and convinced that love could fix abandonment, didn't exist anymore. I'd built myself into someone stronger, someone who didn't wait for rescue. Now I had to figure out if that strength was enough to survive what came next. Sienna knocked on my doorframe. "Mama, it's almost 1:30. Should we start heading to the garden?" I stood, brushed dust from my jeans, and nodded. "Let me grab my keys." The drive to the community garden took 12 minutes through weekend traffic. Sienna sat in the passenger seat scrolling through research articles on her phone, occasionally reading interesting facts aloud. "Mama, did you know that biochar can sequester carbon for up to 1,000 years? That means every filter I make could help with climate change too, not just water access. That's amazing, baby." My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary. She went back to reading, oblivious to the way my heart hammered against my ribs. I'd made my decision somewhere between finding the letter and watching Sienna knock on my door. I wouldn't ambush her with this, wouldn't sit her down and drop the information like a bomb she had no choice but to absorb. Instead, I'd tell her the truth, all of it, and let her decide what came next. If she wanted to meet Tristan today, we'd stay. If she needed time to process, we'd leave and reschedule. If she was angry and wanted nothing to do with him, I'd support that too, even if it meant explaining to a billionaire that his daughter had chosen to walk away. Her agency mattered more than his feelings, more than my guilt, more than the scholarship money or mentorship opportunities or any benefit his presence might bring. Sienna was a person, not a problem to solve. She deserved to be treated like one. We pulled into the gravel parking lot beside the garden gates. The space was mostly empty, a few cars belonging to the weekend volunteers, nothing that looked like it cost 6 figures. Maybe Tristan had taken me seriously about coming alone. Maybe he'd hired a modest rental instead of arriving in whatever luxury vehicle he probably drove. Or maybe he wasn't coming at all. The thought brought both relief and rage in equal measure. Sienna hopped out, already heading toward the tool shed where we kept our gloves and watering cans. I followed slower, scanning the garden plots for any sign of him. "Mama, come on," Sienna called back. "The tomatoes are probably dying." The garden sprawled across half an acre, divided into raised beds and community plots. Sienna had claimed a small corner last year where she grew vegetables she donated to the food bank: cherry, tomatoes, cucumbers, green beans that climbed a trellis we'd built from bamboo stakes and garden twine. I found her already inspecting the tomato plants, checking for pests and pulling a few weeds. Normal. Everything is completely normal, except for the man standing near the gate, watching us with an expression caught between hope and terror. Tristan had come early. What would you do? Tell your teen now, or wait for the right moment? Comment, "Tell her," or "Wait," and drop why. I'm pinning thoughtful takes. I saw him before Sienna did. He stood just inside the garden gate, wearing jeans and a faded university t-shirt, looking more like the boy I'd known than the billionaire from the science fair. No entourage, no Tesla visible in the parking lot. Just him, alone, 15 minutes early and visibly nervous. Our eyes met across the garden beds. He didn't wave or smile or move closer, just stood there, waiting for permission to exist in this space. I appreciated the restraint, even as my stomach twisted. Sienna was still focused on her tomatoes, explaining to them why they needed to produce more fruit. She talked to her plants like they were students in her classroom, patient but firm. It would have been funny if my entire world wasn't about to shift on its axis. "Sienna," I said quietly. She looked up, dirt already under her fingernails. "Yeah? Come sit with me for a second. There's something we need to talk about." Her expression shifted immediately, concern replacing contentment. Kids know that tone. The serious one that means everything's about to change. "Am I in trouble?" she asked, already running through possibilities. "No, baby, nothing like that." I walked to the wooden bench near her plot and sat down. "Just come here." She followed, slower now, her scientist brain already working through variables. When she sat beside me, I could feel her tension, the questions building before I'd said a single word. You know how I've always told you that your father moved away for work before you were born? I started, my voice steadier than I felt. Yeah, cautious now, guarded. That's true. But there's more to the story. I took a breath. He didn't know I was pregnant when he left. I found out after, and by then, he'd changed his number, and I couldn't reach him. Sienna processed this, her face serious. Why didn't you try harder? Like, find him another way? Fair question. The first of many. I was young and hurt and didn't know how. And part of me thought if he wanted to leave that badly, maybe he didn't deserve to know. I held her gaze. I was wrong about that. You deserve to have a father, whether I was angry at him or not. Okay. She drew the word out, waiting for the rest. He's here. Now. In Honolulu. My throat tightened. And he knows about you. Her eyes went wide. How? The science fair. He saw you, and he figured it out. I watched her face cycle through emotions faster than I could name them. Confusion. Realization. Something that might have been hope, or might have been fear. Mr. Cale, she whispered. The scholarship guy. Yes. She stood abruptly, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. He's my dad? The billionaire is my dad? Yes. And he's here? Like, here? I looked toward the gate where Tristan still stood, frozen, watching this unfold from a distance that suddenly felt both too far and not far enough. He's here, I confirmed. He wants to meet you, properly, but only if you want that too. This is your choice, Sienna. Completely yours. She followed my gaze and saw him for the first time, really saw him, and I watched her world crack open. There are doors you have to walk through, even if your knees shake. We'd just opened one we could never close again. Sienna stood frozen, staring at Tristan across the garden beds like he was an equation she couldn't solve. Her chest rose and fell faster than normal, her hands opening and closing. At her sides, that processing gesture she'd had since she was small. Sit back down, baby, I said gently. Let me tell you the whole story. She sat, but perched on the edge of the bench, like she might need to run. I'd seen her do this in debates at school, when information came too fast, and she needed to maintain her escape route while her brain caught up. Your father and I met when we were 21, I began, keeping my voice steady and factual. We were both trying to figure out our lives, me in community college, him building a tech startup from his bedroom. We fell in love the way young people do, fast and certain, convinced we'd figured out something everyone else had missed. Sienna watched me with those analytical eyes, listening but not interrupting. For about a year it was good. We talked about futures and plans. Then he got a job offer in San Francisco, real salary, benefits, the kind of opportunity you don't turn down when you've been eating ramen for a year straight. I paused, choosing words carefully. He said he'd go for 6 months, save money, then come back. We'd go a long distance until then. But he didn't come back. Sienna filled in. No. 2 weeks after he left, he stopped answering calls, changed his number. I got one email saying the job was more complicated than he expected, and he needed space to focus. The old hurt flickered, but didn't catch fire. I'd lived with it too long for it to burn anymore. I was angry, hurt. I decided if he wanted space that badly, I'd give him permanent distance. That's when you found out about me. Sienna's voice was small. 2 weeks after that email, yes. I took 3 pregnancy tests because I couldn't believe it. I reached for her hand. She let me take it. And I had to make a choice. Try to track him down through his family, who'd never really approved of me. Show up pregnant and abandoned, prove all their doubts right. Or raise you myself, and protect us both from people who didn't want us in the first place. You chose me, she whispered. I chose us. You and me, figuring it out together. I squeezed her fingers. But Sienna, I need you to understand. Your father didn't know. He made a terrible choice leaving the way he did, cutting contact without explanation. That's on him. But he never knew you existed. I made sure of that. Her brow furrowed. Why? Because I was 21 and scared and convinced that if he'd wanted me, he wouldn't have left. I thought, if he didn't choose me, he wouldn't choose you either. I was protecting you from rejection that might never have happened. So you made the choice for him. Not an accusation, just an observation. My daughter, always seeing the structure underneath the emotion. Yes. And maybe that was wrong. Maybe I should have tried harder. I looked toward Tristan, still standing at the gate, patient in a way I'd never seen him be. But I can't change the past. I can only tell you the truth now and let you decide what happens next. Sienna pulled her hand from mine and wrapped both arms around herself. Does he want to know me now, or does he just feel guilty? The question cut straight to the center of everything. I think both, I said honestly. And I think we won't know which one matters more until we give him a chance to show us. Sienna stood again, pacing 3 steps in one direction, 3 steps back. Her thinking walk, the one she did when a problem had too many variables to solve sitting still. He's a billionaire, she said, talking through it aloud. He funds science projects and builds computer labs and probably has like 17 assistants. Probably, I agreed. And he just, what? Saw me at the science fair and recognized me. He saw your dimple, same as his. Then he did the math. She touched her left cheek absently, the dimple invisible when she wasn't smiling. So he's known for what, a week? Since last Friday night. And now he wants to be my dad. She stopped pacing, turned to face me. Just like that. After 12 years of not being my dad, he wants to show up and fix it with scholarship money and what else? Trips? Gifts? What's the billionaire version of sorry I missed your entire childhood? There was anger underneath the sarcasm, but also something else. Something that sounded like hope trying to protect itself with cynicism. He doesn't get to fix it, I said firmly. That's not how this works. But he wants to try to know you going forward. If you want that too, what if I don't? What if I say no thanks, keep your scholarship, I'm good with just you? My heart cracked a little. Then that's what we do. You don't owe him anything, Sienna. Not forgiveness, not a relationship, not even politeness if you don't feel it. She absorbed this, her jaw working the way it did when she was fighting tears. What if I want to meet him but I'm also really mad? Then you're honest about both. You get to feel complicated things. You get to take this slow or not at all. Slow, she said immediately. If I do this, it has to be slow, like growing plants. You don't just throw seeds in dirt and expect tomatoes the next day. You water them, give them sun. Wait for the roots to establish before you expect fruit. Only Sienna would process meeting her father through agricultural metaphors. Slow is smart, I said. The best things grow slow. She looked at Tristan again, studying him from a distance. He'd moved slightly closer but stopped at the edge of the first garden bed, giving us space, not encroaching. His hands were still in his pockets, his posture careful, like he understood he was on probation. He looks nervous, Sienna observed. He should be. You're terrifying when you're analyzing people. That got a small smile, the dimple flashing briefly. I learned from the best. She took a long breath, her shoulders rising and falling with it. Decision-making breath. I'd seen it 1,000 times before spelling tests and science presentations, and the day she had to choose between soccer and robotics club. Okay, she said quietly. I'll meet him. But Mama, you stay, the whole time. I'm not doing this alone. I'm not going anywhere. Sienna walked toward Tristan with measured steps, and I followed 3 paces behind. Close enough to intervene, far enough to let this moment belong to them. Tristan saw us coming and straightened, his hands coming out of his pockets, then going back in like he couldn't decide what to do with them. When we stopped 6 feet away, he looked at Sienna with an expression so raw it hurt to witness. Hi, he said, his voice rougher than it had been at the cafe. Hi, Sienna replied, formal and cautious. Silence stretched between them, awkward and necessary. I resisted the urge to fill it with explanations or instructions. They needed to figure out how to exist in the same space without my narration. Can I? Tristan gestured vaguely at the garden. Can I come in? Or would you rather I stay here? asking permission. Good. I'd told him that mattered. Sienna glanced back at me. I gave her a small nod. Your choice. You can come in, she said, but just to the bench, not to my plants yet. Boundaries. My daughter, drawing lines before anyone could cross them. Tristan nodded and followed us to the wooden bench, but he didn't sit. Just stood nearby, waiting for further instruction. Your mom told you, he said, not a question, that you're my biological father and you didn't know I existed until Friday. Yeah. She told me. Sienna crossed her arms, protective. She also said you left without saying goodbye and changed your number, so she couldn't tell you even if she wanted to. He flinched, but didn't deflect. That's true. All of it. Why? The question hung in the air, simple and devastating. Tristan ran his hand over his face, that familiar gesture, and when he spoke, his voice was quiet but steady. Because I was 21 and stupid, and thought disappearing would be easier than admitting I was terrified. The job in San Francisco was real, but the reasons I cut contact were cowardice dressed up as focus. I convinced myself your mom would be better off without me dragging her through the chaos of trying to build something from nothing. But you didn't ask her, Sienna said. You just decided. You're right. I didn't ask. I made a choice that affected both of us without giving her a say, and that was wrong. He looked at her directly, and because of that choice, I missed 12 years of your life. I can't fix that. I can't get those years back, or pretend I was there when I wasn't. Sienna studied him, her analytical gaze taking in every micro-expression. My mom says you want to know me now, more than anything. The words came out like a confession, but only if you want that too. This is your choice, Sienna, completely. She said that too. Sienna's arms loosened slightly. Are you just doing this because you feel guilty, or because you actually care? Tristan crouched down so he was at her eye level instead of looming over her. The gesture was instinctive, respectful, and I saw Sienna's expression soften just a fraction. Both, he said honestly. I feel guilty that I wasn't there, but I care because you're brilliant and passionate and everything your mom said you'd be. And I want to know the person you're becoming, not to fix my guilt, to actually be part of your life, if you'll let me. Sienna watched him for a long moment, her face unreadable. Then she made a decision. Come on, she said, turning toward her garden plot. I'll show you my current experiment. Tristan stood and followed, and I trailed behind them both, watching this strange new constellation form. Sienna's plot was organized with the precision of a much older gardener, rows labeled with popsicle stick markers, a small notebook in a plastic bag hanging from the fence, a collection of mason jars lined up on a wooden shelf. She picked up one of the jars, half filled with soil and water, the contents separated into distinct layers. This is a soil settling test, she explained, slipping into teacher mode. You mix soil and water, shake it, then let it settle. The heaviest particles, sand, sink first, then silt, then clay stays suspended at the top. It tells you soil composition without expensive lab equipment. Tristan leaned closer, genuinely interested. How long does it take to settle completely? 24 hours usually, but clay can take longer if there's a lot of organic matter. She pointed to the layers. See how this one has more sand? That means faster drainage but fewer nutrients. The one with more clay holds water better but can get compacted. And you're testing this because if I'm going to design water filters for different communities, I need to understand their soil types. What works in sandy coastal soil might not work in clay-heavy mountain regions. She set the jar down carefully. Scalability isn't just about making more filters. It's about adapting the design to local conditions. Pride bloomed in my chest. My daughter, thinking 10 steps ahead. Tristan nodded slowly. That's systems thinking. Most people your age, most people any age, only think about the immediate application, not the regional variables. My mom taught me that. She says you can't solve real problems with one-size-fits-all solutions. Your mom is right. He glanced at me briefly, something like regret and admiration mixed in his expression. Have you thought about what kind of testing equipment you'd need to scale this up? To actually manufacture filters for field deployment? Sienna's eyes lit up. I have a whole list, but most of it costs more than we... She stopped, suddenly aware of what she was about to say. More than we have. More than I could afford on print shop wages and community center fundraising. Tristan caught it, but didn't pounce. Instead, he said carefully, what if you had access to a lab? Not fancy, just functional. Equipment that's already there. Space to work. Budget for mistakes. Where would I find that? Sienna asked, skeptical but interested. The community center in Kalihi. My company funded their STEM space 2 years ago. It's open to youth projects, especially ones focused on environmental solutions. He pulled out his phone, scrolled briefly, then showed her a photo. There's testing equipment, computer stations for modeling, even a small fabrication area for prototypes. Sienna looked at the photo, then at me. Question in her eyes, is this okay? Can I want this? I nodded. Wanting resources wasn't the same as being bought. Could I really use it? Sienna asked, turning back to Tristan. Like, actually access the equipment? Absolutely. I can set up an introduction with the program coordinator. They run weekend sessions for youth researchers. He paused. I could come with you for the first visit if you want, or not. Whatever makes you comfortable. The offer hung in the air, optional and careful. Sienna looked at her garden plot, then at the jar in her hands, then at Tristan. If I say yes to visiting the lab, that doesn't mean I'm saying yes to everything, right? Like, I can still be mad about the 12 years? I can still take this slow? Absolutely. Tristan's voice was firm. Whatever pace you set, I'll follow. If you want to meet once a month, we meet once a month. If you want to just email questions about your project, we email. If you need space for a while, I'll wait. This is your timeline, Sienna. She processed this, her scientist brain running scenarios. What if I try this and decide I don't want a relationship? What happens to the scholarship? Good question. Testing for conditions, for strings attached. The scholarship is yours regardless, Tristan said. It's not conditional on a relationship with me. You earned it with your work. That doesn't change based on personal decisions. And the lab access? Same thing. You're a student with a legitimate research project. That's the only requirement. Sienna glanced at me again. I could see her weighing options, calculating risks, trying to determine if this was too good to be true or if maybe, just maybe, it was simply what he said it was. A father trying to show up without demanding immediate forgiveness. Okay, she said finally. I'll visit the lab. And maybe we can talk sometimes. About science stuff. She paused. I'm not ready to call you Dad or anything. That feels weird. Tristan is fine, he said quickly. Whatever you're comfortable with. And my mom comes. To the lab, to any meetings, to everything. I'm not doing one-on-one stuff yet. Of course. He looked at me when he said it, acknowledging the boundary. Sienna nodded, satisfied that her terms had been heard. The best things grow slow, she said, repeating what I'd told her earlier. That's what my mom says about plants. I think it's probably true about people too. Probably, Tristan agreed, and something in his expression cracked open. Relief or hope or gratitude, maybe all three. He didn't push. He didn't pull. He simply stayed. Stayed at the distance Sienna set. Stayed when she laid down rules. Stayed when she said maybe instead of yes. Stayed without demanding more than she was ready to give. And in that staying, something shifted. Not forgiveness. That was too big, too soon. Not trust. That would take months, maybe years. But possibility, the smallest seed of it, planted in careful soil, given just enough water to see if it might grow. The plan changed from if to how, from should we let him in, to how do we build this without breaking what we've already built. I watched them talk about soil composition and filtration models, my daughter and her father, and felt time split into before and after. We couldn't go back to before. So we'd figure out how to live after. The Kalihi Community Center STEM lab smelled like solder and possibility. Sienna stood at a workbench covered in copper wire, mesh screens, and her ever-present notebook, explaining tensile strength to two younger kids who'd wandered over to see what she was building. See, if the wire is too thin, water pressure will bend it, and the whole filter structure collapses, she said, holding up two different gauges. But if it's too thick, it costs more and weighs too much for portability. You have to find the balance point. The kids nodded like they understood, even though they probably didn't. Sienna had that effect. Her certainty made people believe she knew exactly what she was talking about. Usually she did. Tristan sat 3 workbenches away, supposedly reviewing something on his laptop, but actually watching Sienna teach. He'd been doing that a lot over the past 2 weeks. Showing up, staying quiet, observing from the margins like he was afraid taking up too much space would make her change her mind about letting him exist in her orbit. I appreciated the restraint even as it made me sad. This version of Tristan, careful, deferential, constantly seeking permission, was so different from the confident boy who'd once convinced investors to fund a company that existed only in his imagination. Fatherhood had made him small in a way business never had. Mr. Cale, one of the program coordinators, a young woman named Jasmine, approached his table with a tablet. The fabrication printer is giving an error code again. Can you look at it? He stood immediately. Sure. Which one? The Prusa. Kids were trying to print support for a robotics project, and it just stopped mid-layer. Tristan followed her to the 3D printer station, and I watched him troubleshoot with the same focus he probably gave board meetings. He'd been coming to the center every Saturday for 2 weeks, officially as a donor checking on his investment, unofficially as a father trying to learn the shape of his daughter's world. Sienna had noticed but hadn't commented, just accepted his presence the way she accepted the equipment and the space, useful resources that happened to be available. Mama, can you hand me the calipers? Sienna called without looking up from her wire measurements. I passed them over. Are you almost done for today? Maybe another hour. I want to finish this prototype before next week's presentation. The state science fair was 8 days away. Sienna had been preparing like she was defending a doctoral thesis instead of competing against other middle schoolers. Her project had evolved from the original design. Now she had 3 different filter models optimized for different water sources, complete with cost-benefit analysis and scalability projections. Tristan had helped with some of the modeling software, showing her keyboard shortcuts and data visualization techniques. But he'd been careful not to take over. When Sienna hit a problem, he'd ask questions instead of giving answers, guiding without controlling. You're doing the thing, he'd said last week when she got frustrated with a formula that wouldn't balance. What thing? She'd snapped, tired and irritable. The thing where you try to solve everything at once instead of isolating variables. Step back. What's the single question you're actually trying to answer right now? She'd glared at him, then at her notebook, then grudgingly admitted he was right. Small moments, careful steps, nothing dramatic, nothing that looked like the movie version of father-daughter. Bonding, but something was growing in the spaces between their conversations. Tristan fixed the printer and returned to his laptop. Sienna finished her measurements and started sketching modifications. I sat in a folding chair near the window and answered emails for the community. Center fundraiser, all of us existing in the same room without colliding. Progress, I supposed, or at least the absence of disaster. The photo appeared on Monday morning while Sienna was at school, and I was at the print shop processing flyers for a church bake sale. McKenna texted first, "Have you seen this yet?" Then a screenshot. Twitter. Already 17,000 likes. The image showed Tristan walking along the Alawai Canal path, Sienna beside him holding what looked like a water sample jar, me trailing slightly behind with my phone out. Someone had taken it from across the canal with a zoom lens good enough to catch faces clearly. The caption read, "Tristan Cale spotted with mystery woman and kid in Honolulu. New family, tech billionaire, Seja Hawaii sighting." My stomach dropped. The replies were already multiplying. Who is she? Does anyone recognize her? That's definitely his kid. Look at the dimple. Wait, isn't he supposed to be single? When did this happen? Somebody find her Instagram a sap. Plot twist. Secret family he's been hiding for years. The kid looks about 10, 11. Timeline is suspicious. I stared at my phone screen, watching the engagement numbers climb. 18,000, 19,000, 22,000. We'd been careful. No public restaurants, no obvious outings, nothing that looked like a photo opportunity. But the canal path was public space, and apparently someone had recognized Tristan and decided his weekend walk was worth documenting. My phone rang. Tristan. I just saw it, he said before I could speak. I'm having my team work on getting it taken down. DMCA claim, privacy violation, we can... Don't. The word came out sharper than intended. Silence on his end. Don't take it down, I repeated, forcing my voice to calm down. That'll just make it worse. Streisand effect. People will screenshot it, repost it, and turn the takedown into its own story. Leilani, people are already trying to identify you. They're going to find your social media, Sienna's school, everything. If we don't control this now, we can't control it. I sat down on the print shop's back step, suddenly needing air. That's not how the internet works. The harder you fight to erase something, the more people dig. Trust me, I've seen it happen. So what do we do? Frustration bled through his carefully controlled tone. Nothing. Not yet. I watched a car pass on the street, normal life continuing while mine fractured into public consumption. When Sienna's ready, when she decides what story she wants told, then we frame it. We don't erase it. We don't hide. We just wait until she's ready to own her own narrative. And if she's not ready before someone from her school sees this and asks questions, that was the fear underneath everything. Some classmates' parents recognized her from the photo, putting pieces together, turning Sienna's private life into cafeteria gossip before she'd had time to process what it meant. Then we deal with it, I said, sounding more confident than I felt. But we don't make decisions out of panic. We don't let strangers on Twitter dictate our timeline. Tristan was quiet for a long moment. You're right. I don't want her hurt by this. Neither do I. But erasing evidence that you're spending time with your daughter sends the message that there's something shameful about it. Is that what you want her to think? No. God, no. Then we leave it. We ignore the noise. And when Sienna's ready, we tell the story the right way. The board called an emergency meeting on Tuesday afternoon. Tristan told me about it that evening when he stopped by the community center, ostensibly to drop off some supplies, but really to process what had happened. They want a statement, he said, leaning against the wall outside the STEM lab while Sienna worked inside. Something clean. Tristan Cale is delighted to be getting to know his daughter and her wonderful mother. Frame it as a happy reunion, soften any questions about why I didn't know earlier. Let me guess. They want to position you as the good guy who was kept in the dark by the secretive ex-girlfriend. His silence confirmed it. Yeah, that's not happening, I said flatly. I'm not becoming the villain in your redemption story. I told them that. He ran both hands through his hair, exhausted. I said we weren't releasing any statement without your approval and Sienna's consent. They said I was being naive about reputation management. What do you think? He looked at me, really looked, and I saw the internal war playing out. The businessman who'd built an empire partly on managing perception versus the father who was learning that some things couldn't be optimized or branded. I think they're probably right that silence creates space for speculation, he admitted. But I also think the second we try to control the narrative, we lose something more important than good press, which is Sienna's trust. If she finds out we released a statement about her life without asking her, she'll know we care more about optics than her agency. And we'll never get that trust back. Smart. Man. He was learning. So, what did you tell the board? That they'd have to wait. That my daughter's well-being matters more than investor confidence or media cycles. He smiled grimly. 3 of them threatened to resign. Did they? No. But they're not happy. They keep sending me articles about other tech founders who got ahead of personal scandals with strategic transparency. Case studies on reputation rehabilitation. Polls about public perception of family values. I snorted. Family values. From the people who probably have mistresses in 3 countries. 2 countries, he corrected with dark humor. CFO keeps it domestic. We stood in silence for a moment, watching through the window as Sienna adjusted her filter prototype completely, absorbed in her work and blissfully unaware that strangers across the internet were debating her existence. They're going to keep pushing, I said quietly. The board, the PR team, probably your investors. Everyone who has a stake in your public image is going to want you to get ahead of this story. I know, and at some point, staying silent is going to cost you something. Maybe business deals, maybe partnerships. Definitely sleep. I know that too. He turned to face me fully. But I also know that I already cost Sienna 12 years. I'm not going to cost her the right to decide when and how her story gets told. The board can wait. The investors can wait. The whole internet can wait. Even if it damages your company? Even then, no hesitation. I believed him. The small things started accumulating like evidence of intent. Wednesday afternoon, Tristan showed up at my apartment with groceries. Not extravagant, just practical. Milk because I'd mentioned we were out. The specific brand of coffee I liked, mangoes. From the farmer's market, because Sienna went through them like they were candy. You didn't have to do this, I said, surprised and uncomfortable with the gesture. I know, but I was at the store anyway. And I remembered you saying. He trailed off, shrugging. Just trying to help. Thursday evening, he called to ask about my mother. Your mom, he said when I answered. She had early-stage Alzheimer's, right? You mentioned it years ago. How is she? I'd forgotten I'd told him that. Forgotten he might remember. She's in a care facility in Waipahu, I said carefully. Good days and bad days. Why? Because I know that's expensive, and I know you probably visit regularly, and I was thinking, if you ever need help with the costs or with transportation or just someone to sit with her so you can take a break, I want to help, not as some grand gesture, just as someone who cares what happens to the people you love. My throat tightened. I'll think about it. No pressure. The offer stands whenever you're ready. Friday night, Sienna came down with a stomach bug that had her up every 2 hours. I texted Tristan at 11 p.m. to cancel Saturday's lab session, expecting a simple acknowledgement. Instead, he showed up at 7 a.m. with ginger tea, plain crackers, and electrolyte drinks. You look terrible, he said when I opened the door in yesterday's clothes and tangled hair. Thanks. You're not supposed to be here, I know. But you're going on 3 hours of sleep, and Sienna needs you to be functional. He held up the bag. I brought supplies, and I can stay with her for a few hours if you want to shower and sleep. I won't mess anything up. I'll just sit in the living room and be available if she needs something. I should have said no, should have maintained boundaries, kept him in the careful box we'd constructed. Instead, I let him in. He sat on the couch reading research papers on his tablet while I took a 40-minute shower that felt like resurrection. When I came out, he'd made actual food, nothing fancy, just eggs and rice, and left it warming in the oven. Sienna slept through most of his visit, waking once to ask for water. He brought it to her, stayed at the doorway respecting her space, and left without making it a production. Text me if you need anything else, he said on his way out. Seriously, anything. After he left, I found a note tucked under the tea canister. Thank you for letting me help. No expectation of reciprocation. I just wanted to be useful. Tea, small things. Quiet wins. Evidence that he was learning the difference between providing resources and showing up as a person. It mattered more than I wanted to admit. Sunday evening, Tristan called with news. Photo leaked to TMZ, he said without preamble. Full story. Mystery woman identified as Leilani Clark, former girlfriend. The kid is confirmed as 12-year-old daughter Sienna. They're running it tomorrow morning. I sat down on my bed, the air leaving my lungs. How'd they find my name? Property records, probably. Or someone at the science fair recognized you and sold the information. Does it matter? Not really. I pressed my palm against my forehead, trying to think. What are they saying? The usual tabloid garbage. Secret love child, billionaire's hidden family, speculation about why I didn't know. They interviewed some source close to the situation, who claims you deliberately kept Sienna from me to punish me for leaving. Rage flared hot and immediate. That's not... I know. I already have the legal team drafting a defamation response, but Leilani, this is going to get worse before it gets better. Other outlets will pick it up. People will start showing up at Sienna's school, your workplace, everywhere. I thought of my daughter asleep down the hall, finally recovered from the stomach bug, blissfully unaware that tomorrow her life would become public property. We have to tell her, I said, before she hears it from someone else. Agreed. When? Tonight. Now. Before she goes to school tomorrow and gets blindsided. I stood, pacing. Can you come over? I'm already in my car. He arrived 20 minutes later. We sat at my kitchen table and planned how to explain to a 12-year-old that strangers across the world were now discussing her existence like she was a plot twist in someone else's story. We tell her the truth, I said. That someone took a photo, that it got shared online, that people are curious because you're well known. We don't lie. We don't minimize. We tell her exactly what's coming. And then what? Tristan asked. Do we release a statement? Try to shape the narrative before it gets worse? This was the moment. The decision point we'd been circling since the first photo appeared. I looked at him across the table. This man who'd shown up with groceries and ginger tea, who'd sat quietly in community centers learning to be small, who'd told his board that his daughter's agency mattered more than their comfort. We wait, I said firmly. We tell Sienna what's happening, we give her all the information, and we let her decide when and how she wants to respond. Not tomorrow. Not next week. When she's ready. The board won't like that. I don't care about the board. I held his gaze. Do you? He was quiet for a long moment, weighing everything at stake. Then he nodded. Decision made. Okay, he said. When she says... The line in the sand was drawn, not by lawyers or PR teams or people who cared about optics and damage control, by a mother and father choosing their daughter's voice over everyone else's noise. Whatever came next, headlines, speculation, public judgment, we'd face it on Sienna's timeline. Not a second before. 3 a.m. found me at the kitchen table with chamomile tea gone cold and a list of questions I couldn't answer. Sienna had taken the news better than expected. Not well, but better. She'd listened to our explanation about the photos and the articles with that analytical expression she wore when processing complex data, asked clarifying questions, wanted to know specifics about what people were saying, what it meant for her daily life, whether she needed to change her routine. So basically, strangers think they have opinions about my family, she'd summarized. Yes, I'd confirmed. That's weird. Very. Can I still go to school tomorrow, or do I need to hide? Tristan had answered that one. You don't hide. You go to school. Your principal knows what's happening, and she's prepared to handle any issues. But if anyone makes you uncomfortable, students, parents, anyone, you tell a teacher immediately. She nodded, processed some more, then asked the question that gutted me. Are you and Tristan going to get back together now? Is that what happens next? No, I'd said quickly. Too quickly, maybe. This isn't about us. It's about you and him building a relationship. That's separate. Okay. She'd seemed satisfied with that, or at least willing to accept it. Can I go finish my homework now? Just like that. Crisis acknowledged, variables assessed, back to polynomial equations. I wished I could compartmentalize that efficiently. Now, hours later, I sat alone with the question she'd asked and the answer I'd given, and the truth I hadn't examined closely enough. Was this about me and Tristan? Could it be? 9 years ago, I'd loved him with the kind of certainty only 21-year-olds possess. Absolute. Unquestioning. Convinced that feeling something deeply meant it would last forever. When he left, that certainty had shattered into pieces I'd spent years trying to reassemble into something that looked like closure. I've dated occasionally since then. Brief relationships that fizzled when men realized I came with a precocious daughter and no interest in making them my priority. I'd convinced myself I was fine with that arrangement. Sienna needed me whole, not distracted by romance that would probably fail anyway. Safer that way, simpler. But watching Tristan these past few weeks, showing up, staying consistent, learning to be small in big rooms, something had shifted. Not the old feeling exactly, but something new. Something that looked less like the desperate love of my early 20s and more like the cautious respect of someone who'd learned that love without reliability was just pretty words. He was different now. Older, yes, but also more deliberate. The boy who'd made impulsive decisions had become a man who asked permission, who waited for consent, who understood that good intentions didn't matter without follow-through. Or maybe he was just better at performing responsibility. Maybe the consistency would crack the moment things got difficult. Maybe this version of him only existed because he was trying to earn his way into Sienna's life, and once that was secure, he'd revert to the person who changed his number rather than have a hard conversation. I didn't know. That was the truth underneath all the other truths. I didn't know if this was a real change or temporary performance. I didn't know if letting myself feel anything beyond parent cooperation was wisdom or self-destruction. The fear was suffocating, but underneath it, barely audible, was something else. Hope. Tiny, fragile, terrifying hope that maybe joy could enter while healing was still happening. That maybe choosing to try didn't mean forgetting what had broken. That maybe trust could be rebuilt one careful stone at a time if both people were willing to do the work. I didn't know if I was willing yet, but I was starting to wonder. Thursday afternoon, Tristan texted, "Can we talk? Not about Sienna, about us." I stared at the message for 10 minutes before responding. "Where?" "Foster Botanical Garden. The greenhouse. If you're willing." The greenhouse. We'd gone there on our third date 9 years ago, when entrance fees felt expensive, but worth it because Tristan had remembered me mentioning I loved orchids. We'd spent 2 hours wandering through humid air and exotic plants, and he'd kissed me for the first time beneath a staghorn fern that hung like a chandelier. Going back felt dangerous, deliberate. I went anyway. The garden looked the same. Lush, overgrown in the intentional way of curated nature. I found Tristan waiting near the greenhouse entrance, hands in his pockets, looking nervous in a way boardrooms probably never made him. "Thanks for coming," he said. "This feels very symbolic," I replied, not bothering with small talk. "It is." He didn't deny it. I needed to see if they'd fixed it. Fixed what? He gestured toward the greenhouse. The structure had been refurbished since I'd last visited. New glass panels, updated. Climate control systems, a fresh coat of paint on the metal framework. A sign near the door listed recent donors. Tristan's company was third on the list. "You donated," I observed. 6 months ago, before I knew you were back in Hawaii, before the science fair." He looked at the building like it was a confession. "I kept thinking about this place, about that day we came here, about how I kissed you and promised I'd never leave and then did exactly that. So you, what? Give them money to assuage your guilt?" "Partly," he turned to face me, "but also because it felt like the right way to come back, not forcing my way in, not using money to control access, just contributing to something that mattered and hoping that maybe one day I'd earn the right to enter again." The metaphor wasn't subtle, but it was honest. "Do you have a key?" I asked. "No, I donated anonymously, didn't ask for special access or naming rights or any of the perks they offer major donors." He pulled out his phone, checked the time. "But it opens to the public in 10 minutes. I thought we could wait. Go the right way. The right way." Not demanding, not buying his way past boundaries, just waiting for the door to open on its own terms. We sat on a bench near the entrance and watched gardeners move between plots. Tourists study maps. Local families spread blankets for afternoon picnics. Normal life continued around us while we sat in the wreckage and reconstruction of our own history. "I've been thinking about what you said," Tristan started, "about patterns mattering more than promises. And you're right. I can say I've changed until the words lose meaning, but words are cheap. especially from someone who once promised to call and then disappeared. I didn't argue. So, I've been trying to show you instead. Groceries, showing up sick, asking about your mom, small things that don't make headlines but might add up to evidence. They do, I admitted quietly. Add up, I mean. The greenhouse doors opened. We walked in together, the humid air wrapping around us like memory made tangible. The orchids were still there, blooming in impossible colors, purple so deep it looked, black, yellow bright as sunlight, white with red veins that looked like art. I thought I had to choose, Tristan said, stopping in front of a vanilla orchid vine that climbed toward the ceiling. Work or life? Success or relationship? I convinced myself I couldn't build the company and keep us, so I chose what felt like the practical option. And now, I kept my eyes on the flowers, safer than looking at him. Now I know that was cowardice dressed up as ambition. I didn't choose work over you because I had to. I chose it because it was easier than figuring out how to do both, easier than being vulnerable enough to say, I'm scared this won't work, instead of just running. The honesty landed heavy between us. I was 21 and stupid, he continued. But that's not an excuse. Plenty of 21-year-olds manage to communicate like adults. I just wasn't one of them. What changed? I finally looked at him. What makes you different now besides being older and richer? He considered the question seriously. Failure, mostly. I built the company, made the money, got everything I thought I wanted, and it was hollow, not worthless. I'm not going to pretend wealth doesn't matter or that success feels bad, but it wasn't enough. It didn't fill the space where you and Sienna should have been. So you're here because you're lonely? The edge in my voice was intentional. No. I'm here because I finally learned that running from hard things doesn't make them easier. It just makes you alone with your cowardice. He turned to face me fully. I'm here because I want to be the person Sienna deserves as a father. And because I never stopped. He stopped himself, recalibrated. I trust patterns, I said, repeating what I'd told him weeks ago. Not promises, not feelings. Patterns of behavior over time. I know. So, what pattern are you trying to show me? Consistency, presence, follow through even when it's inconvenient. He paused, asking what you need instead of assuming I know, respecting boundaries instead of pushing past them, showing up as who I actually am instead of who I think you want. I studied his face, looking for cracks in the certainty, for hints that this was performance rather than transformation. What I found instead was exhaustion, the kind that comes from doing hard work without shortcuts. I can't promise I won't mess up, he admitted. I probably will. But I can promise I'll keep showing up to fix it. That I won't run just because something's difficult. That's still a promise, I pointed out. Then, watch for the pattern. He held my gaze. I'm not asking you to trust me based on words. I'm asking you to watch what I do and decide for yourself if it's enough. Fair. Terrifying, but fair. We walked deeper into the greenhouse, past bromeliads and ferns, past the tropical fruit trees and the carnivorous plant display. The path curved back toward the orchids, and we stopped where we'd stopped, 9 years ago, beneath the staghorn fern that had witnessed our first kiss. It was bigger now, more established, roots dug deeper into the mounting board, fronds spreading wider. Growth that came from staying in one place long enough to build something substantial. I don't know if I can do this again, I said quietly. Open myself up to someone who left once. Risk Sienna getting attached to a family structure that might fall apart. I know. Tristan didn't try to convince me otherwise. The risk is real. I could fail, not because I want to, but because I'm human and flawed, and still learning how to be a father and a... He hesitated. Whatever we might become, and if you do fail, if this ends badly, then I'll still show up for Sienna. That doesn't change based on what happens between us. She's not conditional on our relationship working out. The clarity of that commitment steadied something in my chest. I'm not asking for a decision today, he continued. I'm just asking permission to try, to show you that the pattern is real, that I can be someone reliable even when it's hard. I looked up at the staghorn fern, at the way it had grown strong through consistent care and time. Not dramatic transformation, just steady presence and the right conditions. Slowly, I said. If we do this, it has to be slow. No grand gestures, no public declarations, just showing up, being honest, building something that can hold weight. Slow is good, he agreed. The best things grow slow. Sienna's words in his mouth made me smile despite myself. She's teaching you well. She's brilliant. She gets that from you. The compliment landed soft, sincere, and before I could overthink it, I stepped closer. Not all the way into his space, just close enough that the distance between us became a question instead of a statement. Tristan went very still, reading the shift, waiting. Ask, I said quietly. Can I kiss you? His voice was rough. Yes, he moved slowly, giving me time to change my mind, and when his lips touched mine, it wasn't the desperate passion of our early 20s. It was careful, deliberate, a question being asked and answered with touch instead of words. The kiss lasted maybe 10 seconds. Not cinematic, not earth-shattering, just honest. When we pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine. Thank you, he whispered. For what? For letting me try. If you believe redemption means changed behavior over time, hit like, comment, pattern, with one change you look for in people. We stayed in the greenhouse another hour, talking in the spaces between the plants. Not about big decisions or future plans, just small truths that build towards something larger. He told me about the board meeting, where he'd refused to release a statement about Sienna, about the 3 members who'd threatened to resign, and the CFO who'd actually followed through. Did you replace him? I asked. Not yet. Figured I'd wait and see if his principals or his paycheck won. He came back 2 days later. Tristan smiled grimly. Turns out standing firm sometimes earns more respect than accommodating everyone. Lesson learned from a 12-year-old. Best teacher I've ever had. I told him about the conversation I'd had with Sienna's principal, about the plan in place for handling media attention if it escalated at school, about how Sienna had matter-of-factly informed her best friends that my bio-dad is apparently famous, but he's still just learning to be a regular dad, so everyone needs to chill. She said that. Tristan laughed. Just, everyone needs to chill. Direct quote. Then she went back to explaining filtration ratios. I shook my head, pride swelling. She refuses to let this be the most interesting thing about her. Smart kid. The smartest. We walked out of the greenhouse as the sun started its descent toward the Pacific, painting everything gold and orange. Tristan walked me to my car in the parking lot, and we stood in that awkward space, where people who've just kissed have to figure out how to end the interaction. So, he said. So, I echoed. Can I take you to dinner sometime? Actual dinner. Just us. Not at the community center or your apartment or anywhere Sienna might need us. The question felt enormous despite its simplicity. A real date. Intentional time together. The beginning of something that existed separate from PO parenting. Maybe, I said. Let me think about it. Fair. He didn't push. Will you tell me if the answer becomes yes? I will. He nodded, accepting the boundary, and pulled out his phone. Can I show you something? The screen displayed a calendar, his personal one, not work. Color-coded blocks filled most days, but every Saturday had a green block labeled Sienna, Community Center. Every other Wednesday showed check-in call. Third Thursday of each month, Leilani's mom, facility visit offer standing. Patterns, documented and deliberate. I'm not asking you to trust promises, he said quietly. I'm showing you the structure I'm building, the rhythm I'm committing to. It's not perfect yet, but it's consistent. I looked at the calendar, at the evidence of intention translated into scheduled action, and felt something in my chest loosen. Keep going, I said. Keep showing up. We'll see where the pattern leads. Let me draw one, he whispered. And I understood he wasn't just talking about calendar blocks and scheduled check-ins. He was asking permission to sketch the outline of what we might become if we both stayed brave enough to try. I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no. And in the space between those answers, a new pattern began to form. One careful stone at a time. The Hawaii Convention Center buzzed with nervous energy and the particular smell of stressed students, deodorant, poster board, and ambition. Sienna stood beside her display table, adjusting her trifold for the 7th time, her presentation outfit perfectly chosen. Navy slacks, a white button-up shirt, and the small plumeria earrings my mother had given her last Christmas. "You ready, baby?" I asked, standing close enough to offer support but far enough to let her own this moment. "I've run this presentation 43 times, she said, not looking up from her water filtration models. "I know every word, every transition, every potential follow-up question, and 3 different answer paths for each." "That's not what I asked." She finally looked at me, and underneath the scientific confidence was my 12-year-old daughter, scared and hopeful, and trying so hard to be brave. "I'm ready," she said, and I believed her. Tristan arrived 10 minutes before judging started, carrying nothing but his phone and wearing jeans with a plain shirt, his new uniform for Sienna events. No designer labels, no obvious wealth markers, just a father showing up to watch his daughter compete. "How's she doing?" he asked quietly, standing beside me in the parent observation area. Terrified and refusing to admit it. "She gets that from you too." I didn't argue. The judges made their rounds, 3 stern-looking academics with clipboards, and the kind of questions designed to find gaps in research. Sienna handled the first 2 with calm precision, walking them through her methodology, her cost-benefit analysis, her scalability projections. The 3rd judge was harder. "Your biochar activation process requires high temperatures. How would communities without reliable electricity access achieve this?" Sienna didn't hesitate. Traditional methods, controlled burns in earthen pits, which actually have historical precedent in indigenous agricultural practices across the Pacific. I've documented 3 different low-tech activation approaches in my appendix, all tested with comparable results to electric kiln activation. The judge made a note. "And the cactus mucilage extraction. Simple mechanical pressing. No electricity required. The tools cost under $50 and can be built from locally sourced materials." I have diagrams. She had diagrams. Of course she had diagrams. The judges thanked her and moved to the next table. Sienna exhaled for what looked like the first time in 10 minutes. 2 hours later, they announced the winners. 3rd place went to a project on coral reef restoration. 2nd place is a renewable energy storage system. The head judge stepped to the microphone with a smile. Our 1st place winner demonstrated not only scientific rigor, but practical innovation with genuine humanitarian impact. Her project addresses a global crisis with solutions that are both effective and accessible. Please congratulate Sienna Clark for her work on low-cost water filtration systems. The applause was deafening. Sienna walked to the stage like she was floating, accepting the trophy with both hands, her dimple flashing so bright it could have powered the convention center. When she reached the microphone for her acceptance speech, she looked directly at me and Tristan standing together in the crowd. "Thank you," she started, her voice steady despite the audience. "I want to thank my mom, who taught me that asking questions is how you find real answers. The Kalihi Community Center for giving me space to work. Mrs. Patterson for believing in this project from the start." She paused, glancing at her notes, then setting them aside. "And I want to thank the folks who provided endless paper towels when my experiments leaked everywhere, who showed up even when I didn't ask them to, and who taught me that the best things grow slow, not naming Tristan directly, but acknowledging him, on her terms, in her words, when she was ready. I watched him process this, watched his eyes go bright with tears. He was too disciplined to let fall in public. Our daughter, brilliant and brave, and choosing her own narrative. The media area backstage was controlled chaos, photographers positioning winners for shots, reporters asking for quotes, parents hovering with phones recording everything. Sienna navigated it with surprising grace, answering questions about her project with the same clarity she'd shown the judges. What inspired you to focus on water filtration? A reporter from the Honolulu Star-Advertiser asked. Basic need meets solvable problems, Sienna replied. 800 million people don't have access to clean water. Most existing solutions are either too expensive or too complicated for the communities that need them most. I wanted to design something that worked and that people could actually build themselves. And what's next for you? State competition is in 6 weeks. If I place there, nationals in Washington, D.C., she grinned. But honestly, I just want to keep testing. Make the design better. Maybe pilot it somewhere that actually needs it, instead of just talking about helping people. The reporter scribbled notes. Is it true that Tristan Cale is mentoring you? Sienna's expression shifted slightly, still polite but more guarded. He's been helpful with some of the technical modeling, but my mom's been my real support through this whole process. Redirecting, protecting our privacy while acknowledging reality. My daughter, already learning to manage narratives. After the formal interviews wrapped, we found a quiet corner near the loading dock. Just the 3 of us, away from cameras and questions and strangers with opinions. You were incredible, I said, pulling Sienna into a hug. I'm so proud of you. You crushed it, Tristan added, hovering nearby, uncertain of his place at this moment. Sienna pulled back from me and looked at him. Then, without warning, she reached out and grabbed his hand, pulling him into our hug. The 3 of us stood there, me, Sienna, and Tristan, in a configuration that looked nothing like the cold opens nightmare scenario where everything fell apart. This was the answer to that moment in the gym when the trophy nearly slipped and recognition landed like a bomb. This was what we'd chosen instead of destruction. Messy, imperfect, tentative connection. Thank you, Sienna said into the space between us. Both of you, for letting me decide, for not making this about you. My throat tightened. Tristan's grip on both of us firmed slightly. Always your choice, baby, I managed. Always, Tristan echoed. We stayed like that for maybe 30 seconds. Not long enough to be dramatic, just long enough to be real. When we pulled apart, Sienna had tears on her cheeks and zero embarrassment about them. Okay. Now can we get malasadas? I've been thinking about Leonard's for 3 hours. Absolutely, I said. Whatever you want. Whatever she wants, Tristan agreed, and the ease with which we fell into united parenting made something in my chest ache with possibility. We walked toward the exit together, Sienna between us talking about judges' questions and presentation improvements. And for the first time since the science fair night, I let myself believe we might actually survive this. Not unscathed, not perfect, but together, in whatever form together meant for us. Tristan's phone rang while we were in line at Leonard's bakery. He glanced at the screen, frowned, and stepped away to take the call. I watched him through the window, his posture shifting from relaxed to rigid within. Seconds, his free hand gesturing in sharp movements that meant frustration. The call lasted maybe 3 minutes. When he came back inside, his jaw was tight. Everything okay? I asked quietly while Sienna debated between regular and Haupia malasadas. Bored, he said tersely. They've scheduled an emergency meeting for Monday morning, demanding I address the family situation before the third-quarter investor call. What does that mean? It means they want me to either publicly claim Sienna and frame it as a positive human interest story, or distance myself until after the product launch, so there's no distraction. He looked at me, something hard and determined in his expression. They're giving me an ultimatum. Sienna appeared with a box of malasadas, oblivious to the tension. They had pineapple ones. I got 6. We can share. Perfect, baby. Go grab us a table. I handed her my wallet. Get whatever drinks you want. She headed toward the counter, and I turned back to Tristan. What are you going to do? Tell them no. To which option? Both. He said it with absolute certainty. I'm not turning my daughter into a PR strategy, and I'm not stepping back from her life because it's inconvenient for investor optics. They can accept that I'm a father now, and that comes with complexity, or they can resign. I don't care which. Tristan, you could lose control of your own company. Then I'll lose it. I've already lost 12 years with Sienna. I'm not losing another day because people who've never met her think she's bad for business. The conviction in his voice was absolute. No hesitation, no calculation, just a choice made and owned. This could cost you everything you built, I said, needing him to understand the stakes. Not everything. He looked toward Sienna, who was pointing at pastries in the display case, with the enthusiasm of someone who'd just won a major competition. The things that actually matter are sitting at that table, eating malasadas and asking if we can stop by the bookstore on the way home. Everything else is just money and titles and the opinion of people who don't know what they're talking about. You're sure? Completely. He pulled out his phone and typed something quickly. I'm emailing them now. They'll have my answer before we finish eating. I watched him type, watched him choose his family over his empire, and felt the last wall around my heart begin to crack. Not promises, patterns, and this one was holding steady. We sat at Leonard's sticky tables eating malasadas and making a plan. Not a PR strategy or damage control campaign, just a simple, honest plan about how to tell the people who mattered before the world decided to tell the story for us. We tell Auntie McKenna first, I said, ticking off names. She already knows most of it, but she deserves to hear the official version from us. Sienna nodded, mouth full of Haupia cream. She's going to say she knew all along. She absolutely is, I agreed. My parents, Tristan added quietly. They need to hear it from me. That they have a granddaughter. That He stopped, recalibrated. That I messed up and I'm trying to fix it. Will they be mad? Sienna asked, suddenly smaller. At me? Yes. At you? Never. He said it with such certainty that Sienna relaxed slightly. They're going to love you. My mom's been waiting for grandkids for years. This isn't how she imagined it would happen, but she's not going to care about the details once she meets you. What about my school? Sienna looked at me. Do we tell them officially or just let them figure it out? Principal Rodriguez already knows the situation, I said. But we should probably give her a heads up that we're going to acknowledge it publicly soon. Let her prepare for any parent questions. And then what? Sienna asked. Do we, post something on social media, hold a press conference? What's the normal way to tell strangers your family situation? The question would have been funny if it wasn't so absurd that a 12-year-old had to consider media strategy for her own existence. There is no normal, Tristan said. But here's what I'm thinking. We write a simple statement. Nothing dramatic, just facts. Tristan Cale is grateful to be building a relationship with his daughter Sienna Clark. The family requests privacy as they navigate this new chapter. That's it. Who posts it? I asked. My company's social media, maybe, or just my personal account. Wherever feels most honest and least corporate. Can I read it first? Sienna asked. Before you post anything? Absolutely, we said in unison. She grinned. You two are getting better at the CO parent thing. Practice, I said. Patterns, Tristan added, catching my eye with a small smile. We finished our malasadas and drove home through Saturday afternoon traffic, the three of us in Tristan's rental car because mine was too small to comfortably fit everyone. Sienna sat in the back scrolling through messages from friends congratulating her on the win, occasionally reading funny ones aloud. Normal. Everything felt surprisingly, impossibly normal. Not fixed. We weren't fixed, but we were beginning. And sometimes the beginning was enough. That evening, after we'd dropped Sienna at home, and she'd disappeared into her room to video call her friends about the competition, Tristan and I sat on my apartment's small balcony, watching the sun set over the neighborhood. The board's going to fight back, he said quietly. Monday's meeting won't be pretty. Are you ready for that? No. But I'm doing it anyway. He leaned back in the plastic chair that had come with the apartment. I spent 9 years building something I thought mattered. Made a lot of money, got a lot of recognition, and it was hollow because the foundation was wrong. I built it on running away instead of running toward something. And now I'm building something different, slower, on ground that can actually hold weight. He looked at me. That includes you. If you'll let it. The question underneath the statement was clear. I thought about the past few weeks, the groceries and the ginger tea, and the calendar blocks that proved intention. The way he'd learned to ask instead of assume. The way he'd chosen Sienna over board approval without hesitation. Patterns, not promises. And the pattern was holding. I'm not ready for grand gestures or big declarations, I said carefully. I'm not ready to move in together or blend our lives completely or any of the things people probably expect when they see us together. Okay. He didn't sound disappointed, just attentive. But I'm ready to try, slowly, carefully, with full knowledge that this might not work, and we'll have to figure out how to co-parent, even if the romantic part falls apart. I can do it slowly and carefully. Can you be honest? Even when it's hard, even when the truth makes things complicated. Yes, no hesitation. Then we try. I reached across the small space between our chairs and took his hand. We keep building this pattern. We keep showing up. We keep choosing Sienna's well-being over our own comfort. And we see where it leads. His fingers laced through mine, warm and solid and real. This is the beginning, he said quietly. Not the fix, not the happy ending. Just the beginning of trying to build something worth keeping. Good, I replied. Because I don't believe in happy endings. I believe in good middles, strong foundations, relationships that can survive hard seasons because the people in them are committed to the work. Then let's build a good middle. We sat like that as the sun finished setting, holding hands on a balcony in a modest apartment that looked nothing like the life Tristan could afford, but everything like the life he was choosing. Inside, Sienna laughed at something on her phone call. Outside, we began. Not perfectly, not dramatically, just honestly. And for now, that was enough. The door to resolution stood open. All we had to do was walk through it together. We told McKenna first, on Sunday morning over coffee at her kitchen table, while Sienna was at a friend's house. She listened to the whole story without interrupting, her expression cycling through surprise, anger on my behalf, and finally something that looked like cautious approval. So, he's actually showing up, she said when we finished. Not just financially, actually showing up. He is, I confirmed. And you're letting him. Not a question, more like an observation that needed acknowledging. Slowly, with boundaries. But yes, she looked at Tristan, her best friend's protective instinct still sharp. You hurt her again. I don't care how many billions you have. I will make your life extremely difficult. Understood, Tristan said seriously. And deserved it. McKenna's expression softened slightly. Okay then. Welcome to the family, I guess. Try not to mess it up this time. We told my neighbors next. Mrs. Yamamoto, who lived downstairs and always brought Sienna leftover baked goods, and the Rodriguez family across the hall, whose kids played with Sienna at the community pool. Mrs. Yamamoto took it in stride. I wondered why that fancy car kept showing up on Saturdays. Thought maybe you'd started dating someone rich. She smiled at Tristan. You're Sienna's father. She has your eyes. Thank you, he said, and I could see the words landing differently than any business compliment ever had. The Rodriguez family was more direct. Does this mean Sienna's moving away? Their oldest daughter asked, worried clear in her voice. Because she promised to help me with my science project next month. She's not going anywhere, I assured them. Everything stays the same, just with one more person around sometimes. Good. She's the smartest person I know, and I need her. At the community center, Uncle Ray from the print shop cornered us while we were dropping off flyers. Saw the news, he said, nodding at Tristan. The tech guy, yeah? Sienna's dad? Yeah, Tristan confirmed. You take care of them. That girl's special. I'm going to change the world someday. Uncle Ray said it like a command, not a suggestion. I know. I will. Good. Uncle Ray turned to me. You need anything, more hours, different schedule because of all this attention. You tell me. We take care of our own here. My throat tightened. Thank you, Uncle. Each conversation was small, human scale. No dramatics, no judgment. Just people who knew us responding to new information and adjusting accordingly. The bodega owner where we bought groceries nodded and said, Family's family. However it comes together, The librarian who'd watched Sienna grow up through summer reading programs smiled and said, "Good. She deserves to have her father around." Simple acceptance from people who'd actually been present for our lives. It mattered more than any headline or social media validation ever could. These were the people who'd show up if we needed help, who'd notice if Sienna seemed troubled, who formed the actual fabric of our daily existence. They knew us. Not the version that existed in news articles or tech blogs, but the real us, the woman who sometimes paid rent 3 days late, and the girl who volunteered at the garden every weekend, and now the father who was learning to show up consistently. We told his parents last, on Sunday evening at their house in Manoa. That conversation was harder, heavier with his mother's tears and his father's quiet disappointment about missed years. But they were kind to Sienna when we brought her the following week. And his mother held our daughter like she was porcelain and a promise combined. "You look so much like your daddy did at your age," she said, touching Sienna's face gently. Same serious expression. Same way of watching everything before deciding if it's safe. Sienna had smiled, and his mother had cried again, and we'd stayed for dinner that stretched into the evening. Family, expanding and reforming around new truth. The Honolulu Magazine. The piece ran 3 weeks after the state fair. The journalist, a woman named Keiko Tanaka, had approached us carefully, pitching a story that focused on Sienna's project rather than the billionaire father angle. "I want to write about science," she'd said during our initial meeting, "about what drives a 12-year-old to spend months solving a global problem. The family situation is context, not the headline." Sienna had agreed to the interview on one condition: "You can ask about my dad, but the story has to be about the work, not the drama." Keiko had honored that completely. The article was titled "Clean Water, Clear Vision: How a Honolulu Middle Schooler is Rethinking Filtration." 4 pages, mostly about Sienna's methodology, her testing process, and her plans for scaling the design. The family situation appeared in 2 paragraphs near the end. Sienna's work has attracted attention from Kale Ventures, founded by Tristan. Kale, who recently connected with the daughter he didn't know he had. Rather than focus on the personal story, Kale has chosen to support Sienna's scientific pursuits through mentorship and resources, allowing her work to speak for itself. "She doesn't need me to make her project legitimate," Kale told us. "She's doing that on her own. I'm just grateful to watch it happen." The centerpiece photo showed Sienna's hands holding a mason jar filled with layers of settled soil, her notebook visible in the background, covered in calculations. Her face wasn't even in the shot, just her hands and her work, the tools of her brilliance taking center stage. "They got it right," Sienna said when the issue arrived, studying the spread with critical eyes. "They didn't make it about you," she added, glancing at Tristan. "They made it about science." "As it should be," he replied. The article got picked up by a few education blogs and environmental websites. Sienna's inbox filled with messages from other young scientists, from teachers wanting to use her design in their curricula, from a non-profit in the Philippines asking if she'd be willing to consult on a pilot program. Real impact, built on actual work rather than celebrity connection. "This is what I wanted," Sienna said, reading through the messages. "Not to be famous because my dad is famous. To be respected because my work is good." "Your work is excellent," I corrected. "And you earned every bit of this attention." She smiled. "I know, but it's still cool." The magazine sat on our coffee table for weeks, proof that we'd managed to navigate the story on our own terms. Not perfectly, there were still gossip blogs and Reddit threads dissecting our timeline, but the narrative, that mattered, the one in actual journalism, centered on Sienna's agency and achievements. Her story, her voice, her choice about how the world got to know her. Exactly as it should be. McKenna hosted a backyard dinner 6 weeks after the state fair to celebrate Sienna's qualification for nationals. String lights crisscrossed above the small yard, and someone's Bluetooth speaker played old island music at just loud enough volume. Sienna sat with McKenna's nieces, teaching them about water testing. Tristan stood near the grill helping McKenna's husband with teriyaki chicken. I floated between conversations, refilling drinks and accepting congratulations from neighbors who'd become family through years of shared potlucks and borrowed sugar. Normal. Beautifully, impossibly normal. "You look happy," McKenna said, appearing at my elbow with a wine glass. "Like, actually happy. Not just getting through it. Happy." "I am," I admitted. "It's weird. Good weird or bad weird?" "Good. Scary. Both." I watched Tristan laugh at something Uncle Ray was saying, watched how he learned to exist in these spaces without performing wealth or importance. "I keep waiting for it to fall apart." "Maybe it won't," McKenna suggested gently. "Maybe you get to have this." The thought sat strange and hopeful in my chest. Later, when the food was gone and the kids were playing tag in the growing darkness, someone changed the music to something slower. Couples drifted together, McKenna and her husband, Rodrigue's parents, even Mrs. Yamamoto swaying with her sister who'd come for dinner. Tristan appeared beside me. "Dance?" "There's no dance floor," I pointed out. "There's grass and music." "Close enough." I let him pull me into the space between the grill and the string lights. His hand settled at my waist, mine on his shoulder, and we moved in the slow circles that Aaron really dancing but served the same purpose, closeness with rhythm, intimacy with structure. "Thank you," he said quietly, his breath warm near my ear. "For what?" "For this, for letting me be part of your world, for not making me prove I deserve it every single day." "You still have to prove it," I corrected, but there was no edge in my voice. "Just not every day. Maybe every other day." He laughed softly. "Fair enough." Sienna appeared at the edge of our non-dancing, watching with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Are you two together now? Like, officially?" We stopped moving. Tristan looked at me, letting me answer. "We're trying," I said honestly, slowly. "Is that okay with you?" She considered this seriously. "Yeah, I think so. You seem less stressed when he's around, and he actually listens when you talk, which is better than the last guy you dated." "The last guy I dated was 3 years ago," I protested. "Exactly. Your standards were terrible." She grinned. "These are better." Then she ran back to her game of tag, leaving us standing in the grass under string lights. Trying not to laugh at being evaluated by a 12-year-old and found acceptable. "She approves," Tristan said, "for now. She reserves the right to change her assessment based on future data. Sounds fair." We kept dancing that wasn't dancing, and I let myself believe this might actually work. Saturdays developed a rhythm. Not every Saturday. Sienna had friends and activities and a life that didn't revolve around us, but most Saturdays followed a pattern that became something we all looked forward to. Morning started at Rainbow Drive-In, where Sienna insisted their Loco Moco was scientifically superior to anywhere else's. We'd eat breakfast in Tristan's car because the picnic tables were always full, Sienna in the back working on homework or reading, while Tristan and I talked about logistics and schedules and occasionally something that had nothing to do with parenting. "Did you always want kids?" I asked one Saturday, surprising myself with the question. He'd thought about it. "I don't know if I wanted them, specifically, but I wanted a family, wanted to build something that mattered beyond quarterly earnings. I just didn't know how to do both. And now I know you don't do both. You do one thing, family, and everything else is organized around it. The business exists to support life, not the other way around." After breakfast, we'd drive to the Alawai Canal path for a walk. Sienna would collect water samples for ongoing testing, explaining pH levels and contamination markers to Tristan like he was one of her students. He'd ask questions that were sometimes naive but always genuine, and she'd answer, with the patience of someone who loved her subject enough to teach it endlessly. Then, the hardware store. This became my favorite part somehow. Wandering the aisles of City Mill while Sienna picked out supplies for her latest project, Tristan gravitated toward the bolt section just in case. Just in case. What? I'd asked the first time. In case you need something fixed. Better to have the right size already. He'd bought an entire organizer of assorted bolts, nuts and washers that now lived in my apartment's utility closet. Hadn't needed a single one yet, but knowing they were there felt like a promise kept in hardware form. We'd end Saturdays at the community center if Sienna had lab time, or the garden, if her plants needed attention, or sometimes just back at my apartment, where Sienna would disappear into her room and Tristan and I would cook dinner together, a ritual that felt domestic in ways that still surprised me. "You're staying for dinner, right?" Sienna would ask, like the answer might change. "If that's okay with you," he'd reply every single time. "It's okay." Small confirmations, weekly check-ins, Sienna's way of maintaining agency even as the pattern solidified. These weren't grand gestures or movie moments, just ordinary Saturdays that built into something sturdy enough to hold weight. I kept my own quiet promises during these rituals. I will notice if the pattern breaks. I will speak up if something feels wrong. I will protect Sienna's space, even as I make room for Tristan. I will not sacrifice myself for ease, and so far, I haven't needed to invoke any of them. The pattern was holding. 2 months after the state fair, on a Saturday that followed the usual rhythm, Sienna said something that cracked us both open. We were at the garden, Sienna harvesting tomatoes while Tristan helped me repair the trellis that had partially collapsed during last week's wind. Normal work, comfortable silence, the kind of moment that felt too ordinary to be significant. "You're not the dad I pictured," Sienna said suddenly, not looking up from her tomato plant. Tristan went very still. I saw his hand tighten on the bamboo pole he was holding. Sienna continued, oblivious to the tension. "When I was younger, I used to make up stories about you. Sometimes you were a spy who couldn't contact us for safety reasons. Sometimes you were a doctor saving lives in remote places. Once I decided you were an astronaut stuck on a space station." She pulled a perfectly ripe tomato and placed it in her basket. None of those versions asked good questions. "What do you mean?" Tristan's voice was careful. "The dad I pictured would just show up and everything would be perfect. Like magic. We'd instantly understand each other and have all these deep conversations, and it would feel like we'd never been apart." She moved to the next plant. "But you're not like that. You ask questions instead of assuming you know things. You let me set boundaries. You show up even when it's boring. That's not what I pictured, but it's also exactly what I needed." She looked up then, squinting against the sun. "So you're not the dad I pictured, and also exactly the dad I pictured, because the best version of you is the one who asks good questions and listens to the answers." Tristan's eyes were wet. "That might be the best thing anyone's ever said to me. Don't cry. You'll make Mama cry, and then I'll cry, and the tomatoes will judge us." We laughed, all three of us, and the moment passed into the collection of ordinary miracles that made up our rebuilding. That night, after Tristan left and Sienna was asleep, I sat on my balcony thinking about mending. For years, I'd thought healing meant returning to the state before the break, whole again, unmarked, like nothing had ever hurt. But watching Tristan and Sienna build something from honesty and consistency, I'd learned differently. Mending didn't mean making it like before. Mending meant stronger cracks. The places we'd broken, where he'd left, where I'd hidden Sienna's existence, where we'd both failed at communication, those cracks were still visible, would always be visible, but we'd filled them with better material, with honest conversations, and kept promises and patterns that proved we could hold weight even after shattering. The cracks didn't disappear. They just became part of the structure, proof we'd survived, evidence we'd chosen repair over replacement. What's your one-line lesson from this story? Comment "mend" with it. If this gives you courage, share it with someone who needs a second chance. Subscribe to Mr. Steele Rich Stories for more true-life narratives with real takeaways. We weren't the family I'd pictured at 21, young and certain and convinced love was enough. We were better, messier, yes, more complicated, absolutely, but built on ground that could hold through storms because we'd learned, painfully, slowly, that the best things don't grow from perfection. They grow from showing up, from asking good questions, from choosing each other even when it's hard, from mending the cracks instead of pretending they never existed. And in those ordinary miracles, Saturday diners and hardware store bolts, and garden harvests, We'd found something worth more than the fantasy. We'd found something real, something that could bend without breaking, something that could hold the weight of three imperfect people trying to build a family from honesty instead of hope. Something that proved the best things really do grow slowly, one careful day at a time, one kept promise at a time, one good question at a time, until the pattern became strong enough to call it home.